settings. It's up going live now. Very good. You're live.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Fam Sports New York Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. And Mars, we're a couple minutes past 8:30, so we're running on basketball time. So not football time, we're running on basketball time. I just want to make sure that this is going live right now. Yep. Okay, perfect. All right. So appreciate everyone for joining. Obviously, give a thumbs up and subscribe, guys, for future content. This is our Week 7 preview show for Section 1 and the Hudson Valley Football League. And how it's going to work, guys, we're going to talk about the games on slate. We're going to go into kind of the playoff pictures and the league standings. We have some leagues that are actually in the playoffs already. The Hudson Valley Football League is in the playoffs in the quarters. This is the final regular season week for 1AA, 1A, 1B. C and D have one more regular season week, and then they go into the playoffs. So, again, different groups starting at different times, but we are in the really important aspects of the football last of the regular season, kind of the clinch playoff spots, clinch seedings, teams trying to pull off upsets, and even teams that are knocked out, again, trying to pull off some upsets, knocking teams out of the playoffs, but also evaluating for the future, Mars, which are also really important. And again, just wanted to say for the chat, obviously, besides giving a thumbs up and subscribing, make sure to throw your questions in the chat. We will kind of run through our schedule, and if there are questions that come up that we'll answer them, or we'll push them out towards the end. But Mars, any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, dude, like, I think this is like the crunch time of all football, because now we're about to get into the playoffs, and I think this is really where certain teams are really going to need to, make that bread. They're going to have to win those games and really get themselves right in that playoff spot, because for a lot of these games that we're going to talk about today really have a lot of implications. And I think that's going to be really the interesting thing about it, is whoever can get those wins really will change the landscape of just, Section 1 or the HVFL in general. So it's going to be really important to see who wins and comes away, going into these playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see already comments coming in. Henry Bennett wants to start with Mammo and Scarsdale. We are actually, after we talk about the league standings, we'll dive into the games and pick them right after that. And we will start with AA, so we'll get there. I hope you stay for the whole show, though. Also, if you guys could share our the show, that would be very appreciative as well. I do see a question here from Football Cute's brother. Who are your top 5 Section 1 coaches? That's a really tough one. I think we'll answer that later because I need to think about it. But here are the games on slate, guys, and then we'll answer it. Let's just talk. We got 29 games. One team is out on a bye in John J. Cross River. The Hudson Valley Football League, like I mentioned, playoffs have started, and we have the first matchup is Ramapo, the number 4 seed, at Walter Panis, the number 1 seed on one side of the bracket. We have an A matchup in Mayapack at Clarkstown North. We have an A matchup, Harrison at Fox Lane. A matchup, Rye at Lakeland. These are all league games, by the way. We have an A matchup, Sleepy Hollow at Somers. Another Hudson Valley Football League playoff game in the quarters is the number 3 seed, Tappan Zee at number 2 Spring Valley. Another Hudson Valley Football League playoff game in number 4 seed, Hastings at number 1 seed, Greeley. And we have an A matchup, Brewster at Nyack. We have a AA matchup, RCK at Suffern. We have an A matchup, Yorktown at Clarkstown South. Some very intriguing matchups, Mars. We have a C matchup, Westlake at Valhalla, very interesting one. A AA matchup, Ossining at John Jay East Fishkill. We have a B matchup, Hen Hud at Briarcliff Hamilton Football Program. We have a AA matchup, Yonkers Brave at Yonkers Forest in the annual Yonkers Rivalry. That one's non-league, but it is a rival game. We have Arlington at Mount Vernon in a AA. We have a B matchup in Byram Hills at Nanuet in a very big game. A AA matchup, White Plains at New Rochelle, big-time rivalry league matchup. We have Ardsley at Pleasantville, another big league matchup. Carmel at North Rockland in a AA matchup. We have a B matchup, Pearl River at Bronxville. C matchup, Croton Harmon at Albertus Magnus. We have a CD matchup, Rhinebeck at Tuckahoe, a C matchup, Dobbs Ferry at Woodlands. We have an A matchup, Pelham at Eastchester in a rivalry game, league matchup, huge one. C and D matchup, Putt Valley at Haldane. C matchup, Blindbrook at Irvington. We have a AA matchup, Scarsdale at Mamaroneck. And then in the last two games are Hudson Valley Football League games. One is a playoff game, number 3 seed Portchester at number 2 Edgemont, and Poughkeepsie at Peekskill. That is not playoffs, a non-playoff game right there. So those are the games on slate. I mentioned John Jay Cross River is on the bye for this week. And Mars, let's talk about the standings and the playoff picture. And let's start with AA. And when you look at kind of, again, split into two different groups, I have listed as Group A and Group B. In Group A, Carmel is sitting at the top at 6-0. They have clinched the top 3 spot in the playoffs, but they have not clinched the league yet. And they play at North Rockland, and things are kind of interesting here. Now, there's different scenarios that can play out. Obviously, Carmel with a win wins the league and the number 1 seed. But if North Rockland were to defeat Carmel and Arlington were to lose, I think that makes North Rockland league champs. And that will put Carmel at 2 and Arlington at 3. And if North Rockland wins and Arlington wins, then we get into a 3-way tie for the league. And when it's a 3-way tie, it goes to first half points allowed, I believe, is the metric. And if you look at the numbers, Carmel has allowed 19 first half points. Arlington has allowed 41 first half points. And North Rockland has allowed 37 first half points. So the one who allows the least amount of first half points gets the number 1 seed and the league. And then it's head to head between those two other teams. So interesting dynamic there. There isn't a scenario where Arlington can win the league. There isn't a scenario on that part, but there is a chance that North Rockland can. So you got, Carmel sitting at 6-0, 5-0 league play, followed by Arlington, who's 4-1, and North Rockland, who's 4-1, both vying for this second spot. Now, Arlington does have the tiebreaker over North Rockland. Sitting at 4, Mars, is Mount Vernon, who has clinched the playoff spot. They play Arlington, and if let's just say North Rockland loses and Mount Vernon wins, then we get into a 3-way tie for 2, 3, and 4, which is also another interesting. So interesting dynamics here. But Mars, a lot of credit to Mount Vernon before I go to the other side. I mean, when was the last time Mount Vernon made the playoffs in AA? So I think a lot of kudos to the coaching staff and to the program for Mount Vernon clinching a playoff spot at 4-2. Really strong season for them. And then it's followed up by Suffern, who's 2-4, Yonkers Force, and RCK. Now, when we go to the other side in B, Mars, Mamaroneck 6-0, 5-0 in league play. They have clinched the number 1 spot on their side of the bracket and the league with their win last week. Huge win last week. Followed up by John Jay East Fishkill, who is 5-1, 4-1 in league play. They have clinched the number 2 spot. So the first 2 spots have been clinched. The question is 3 and 4. Now, New Rochelle is sitting there at 3. They're 4-3, 3-2 in league play. They have clinched the playoff berth, but they have one final league game that they have to play. And Scarsdale is right behind them at 4-2, 3-2 in league play, who has also clinched the playoff spot. The question is, though, who gets number 3 and 4? Now, if New Rochelle loses and Scarsdale wins, Scarsdale will get the 3rd spot. New Rochelle will get the 4th. But if they both win or they both lose, New Rochelle will get 3, Scarsdale will get 4, because New Rochelle has the tiebreaker over Scarsdale. That's followed up now by Ossining at 5, White Plains at 6, and Yonkers Brave at 7. So that is AA, Mars. Really intriguing AA matchups there. Do you have any quick thoughts about AA?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the fact that Mount Vernon is where they are clinching a playoff spot is obviously a big deal. And I think that, like you said before, give them a lot of kudos to the coaching staff and the kids for really stepping up, right, and kind of like shutting up a lot of people that probably didn't think that they would make it there. And I also think that the fact that these were all just so close, you're getting all these different tiebreakers, and I think that's kind of just it's not outrageous because it just shows you how close a lot of these teams are in AA. And I think that's what's really impressive is how basically every single game matters here, right? That's kind of the key thing that I think is the most important for really, I mean, it's always been important every game, but I feel like it's just been now more emphasized than ever. You know what I mean? I feel like it's now every game really does matter about points, score, like what you scored, how much your defense played, and just how whether you won and lost. I mean, it's just crazy how close these teams are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when we go to A, Mars, and I do like that they are using points allowed, although sometimes it's very lucky. Sometimes could it be second half points or first half points? Some teams are better second half teams than first half teams. So all these things are so interesting. But when we move to A, Mars, and when we look at the A side of A, the A League, Somers has won the league at 6-0. They're 5-0 in league play. They've clinched the number 1 seed and the league title. I mean, we'll get into them, but they have been playing really strong football the last 2 weeks and complete football. They're really starting to look like the favorite out of A, followed up by Pelham, who is 5-1, 4-1 in league play. They have clinched the top 3 spot, but they have not clinched the number 2 spot because they play Eastchester, who's right behind them at the number 3 spot at 5-2 and 3-2 in league play. A win for Eastchester this week, playing Pelham, will clinch the number 2 spot and give Pelham the number 3 spot. But an Eastchester loss, there is a scenario where they don't even make the playoffs, which is pretty crazy. But that's how it works right now. They're sitting at 3-2, followed up by John Jay Cross River, who's 3-4, 3-3 in league play. They're out in a bye week. They lost to Mayapack last week in a game I think that could potentially really haunt them and haunt this season if they're the ones that are left out of the playoffs, which there is a chance that happens. Right, followed up by Mayapack, who's 3-3. They're on the outside looking in right now at 2-3, but they're playing at Clarkstown North. Again, here's a scenario for you. Eastchester wins, they're in, right? And if they win and Mayapack wins, then John Jay Cross River gets knocked out, right? Now, if Eastchester loses and Mayapack wins, we are sitting now at a 3-way tie again at 3-3 for the 3rd and 4th spot. And when there is a 3-way tie, I mentioned it in AA, it is first half points allowed. And when you look at the first half points allowed, Mayapack has allowed 41 first half points. Eastchester has allowed 42 first half points. And John Jay Cross River has allowed 65 first half points, right? And as you could see, there is a pretty big jump from 41 and 42 to 65, right? So, I think Eastchester and Mayapack are kind of in the driver's seat of their destiny right now. But there is a scenario John Jay Cross River can get in. I mean, if Eastchester and Mayapack both lose and Mayapack gives up less first half points than Eastchester, then what's going to happen is Mayapack will get the 3rd spot, and it'll be between the head-to-head tiebreaker between Eastchester and John Jay, and John Jay beat Eastchester. So that will give John Jay the 4th spot, right? So pretty wild scenarios. Clarkstown North is sitting at the 6th spot at 2-5. Sleepy Hollow is sitting at the 7th spot. So Mars, what are your thoughts on this side of the bracket?
I mean, I think the biggest surprise, in my opinion, was the tandem between Eastchester, Mayapack, and John Jay Cross River being extremely close. Because you really look up at the tiebreaker of all 3 of them, each team has beaten each other, right? So just really now analyzing how close they are based on the amount of points allowed, as well as just the wins against each other, and just like those minute stats are really just so crucial to seeing who's going to progress onto the next stage. And it's just crazy to think of how close those games were, right? I said this in AA as well. I mean, you're always seeing how many tiebreakers and how impactful they really are. So I really think it's kind of crazy to see, how it got all the way to the last week to decide who's going to make the 3rd and 4th spot in this division. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you go to the other side, Mars, I mean, we're still trying to figure out who wins the league. I mean, we have a 3-way tie right now for first place between Rye, Harrison, and Clarkstown South, all at 5-1 in league play. Now, Rye 6-1 overall, Harrison 6-1 overall, and Clarkstown South 5-1 overall. They've all clinched the playoff spot, but who is going to be the number 1, number 2, and number 3 seed is what we're trying to figure out. And again, obviously, if any team wins and the other two loses, that team is going to be the number one seed, and the other two will be in the head-to-head tiebreaker. But let's just say all three of them win. We're again going back to a three-way tie, looking at first half allowed points. And Clarkstown South right now is allowed 27 first half points. Rye is allowed 35, and Harrison is allowed 37. So these are a little bit closer than on the other side. But man, this thing is wide open. Now, if there's only two teams that are head-to-head, I just want to make this pretty clear for everybody. It's head-to-head, who won against the other. But in a three-way tie, that's when it goes to that extra tiebreaker to kind of break it up. But those three are like sitting pretty right now. Three very talented teams. Really interested going into this week. Brewster's sitting at the 4 spot, Mars. And if they win, they clinch the number 4 spot. It's pretty easy, right? If they win, they clinch the 4 spot. If they lose and Yorktown wins, then they get kicked out and Yorktown wins the 4th spot. But Brewster just needs to win or Yorktown to lose to get that 4th spot. It's better to win and earn that in without backing in. But there is a scenario where they don't. Yorktown is sitting at 4-3, 3-3, like I mentioned, and followed up by Lakeland, Foxland, and Nyack. So all those things, those are kind of the scenarios for B, Mars. What are your thoughts on the B side?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of like the same story. I mean, I keep saying, I feel like I'm saying this all the time, but the fact is that you're looking at that 3rd and 4th spot for almost both divisions. I mean, you're really now granted, I think that when you're looking at the other side, you're starting to get kind of clearer pictures here about, really top level teams like, you're looking at, Rye and everything, but like the key idea here is that really you don't know who's landing where, right? I think that's kind of the really most interesting part about how these playoffs work. Because like you said, I think in single A, the other side was it gets to the level of just how many points allowed in the first half. Like it gets really that lucky, whether a team came out slow in the first half of certain games and all of a sudden, that could really impact them in just deciding playoff seedings.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now when we head to B, Mars, Class B, all these teams make the playoffs. The question is who get the seeding, right? And when you look at Pleasantville is sitting up at 6-0. They've clinched the league and the number 1 spot in league play. The question is who's going to be 2 and 3, and kind of the rest of them, right? So Byram Hills is sitting tied with Nanuet, both 5-1 in league play. They play each other this week, so obviously a huge matchup. The winner between the two will win the number 2 spot. The loser is actually going to clinch the number 3 spot. And sitting at 4 is Ardsley, who's 4-2 in league play. They clinched the number 4 spot last week, which is really important because what does that mean, Marsh? You get a home playoff game, right? So that's obviously extremely important. So that's sitting at 4. The question is after that, right? So Pearl River, a win will clinch the number 5 spot for them, which means they would be playing Ardsley. Hen Hud, a win or a Bronxville loss will clinch the number 6 spot. For Bronxville, a win and a Hen Hud loss will clinch the number 6 spot and push Hen Hud to 7. And Briarcliff is sitting at 1-6, 0-6 in league play. They are at the 8th seed. So right now they're slated to play at Pleasantville. Mars, any thoughts about B?
Yeah, I mean, B is like, I think right now I guess you would say the first seed's kind of locked, and kind of the second seed is kind of like, I guess, close to being almost completely locked, but it's really about
the winner of this week's game is
going to be locking the second seed. But basically, after 1 and 2, that's where 3 and 4 get interesting, and then it's really the 5, 6, 7, 8, or really it could be up in the air for a lot of these teams. So it really depends on who wins certain games. But yeah, I think I think that the top 2, 3, 4 is going to be interesting, but the bottom 4 is also going to be kind of dependent on who wins certain games. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see where teams land after this final week.
Yeah. When we go to C, Mars, again, they have an extra week of the regular season. Hudson Valley Football League, we already talked about the playoff matchups, and we'll get into those games. But for C, it's the top 2 teams that advance. I originally thought it was top 4, but I'm guessing because they have that extra regular season, it's going to be top 2. They go right to a semis. Sitting right now at the top is Valhalla and Westlake, both at 3-0. So those are the 2 playoff teams, but they play this week that it gets to determine who is the first seed and who is the second, right? So really an intriguing matchup there. on one side. And then on the other side, a little bit more interesting, Dobbs Ferry is 2-1 in league play, 5-1 overall. Irvington is right behind them, 2-1 over in league play, 3-3 overall. Then it's Rhinebeck at 1-5, 1-2 in league play. Woodlands 1-6, 1-2 in league play, and Blindbrook, who's 1-6, 0-3 in league play. Now, I do think, again, there's actually not a exact clinch, I think, in this one right now. But if Dobbs Ferry wins, it will clinch, I believe, the number one spot. So if Dobbs Ferry wins and Irvington loses, it clinches the number one spot. If they both win, I think goes to the last regular season game. I got to see what the last regular season game is. But there is a scenario where Woodlands, if they win versus Dobbs Ferry and Irvington wins, that's going to create a scenario where Dobbs Ferry and Woodlands are 2-2 in league play, and Irvington sitting at 3-1 in league play. So there is an interesting dynamic on this side. Any thoughts on C, Mars? And on D, they'll go right to the section titles. Tucko sitting at 6-0 and Haldane's sitting at 4-2 between those two teams.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of like the similar thing, dude. I mean, like, right now, it's almost like you want to see the matchups. You want to see who's going to be pairing up against each other because, you know, C is very competitive. And I think that, you know, you really have to see kind of, you know, who's going to be, you know, has favorable matches because any of these games can really change the tide, right? I think at the end of the day, like, I think that first round, I'm not sure if I'll see any major upsets, but, like, dude, it could be interesting with some of these teams that are going up against each other. I mean, we'll talk more about who we like in some of these matchups, but this final week for C, I know that, you know, they basically have like another extra, you know, kind of
one more regular season.
Yeah, one more season game to kind of like keep it going. But these weeks all matter. They all kind of declare, you know, seedings and everything. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So those were the league standings. I mentioned Hudson Valley Football League. We're going to talk. We already mentioned the matchups in the league, in the games on slate. And we're going to talk about these games. This is the next part. But again, I just want to stop and welcome in people coming in. We appreciate you guys joining the show. Please make sure to give that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Share the link if you know people who want to watch this kind of content. We just went over the league standings and the playoff pictures for AA, A, B, and C and D. Hudson Valley Football League is entering their playoffs this week. And so now we're going to get into kind of the matchups, Mars, and pick the games. And then we'll, you know, if you have any questions, I know we got one question about who our top 5 Section 1 coaches are. I need to marinate on that for a while. But Mars, let's dive into the games and start picking them. And let's start with AA. And I just want to kind of give our records, Mars, so far this season. It's been a very competitive season between us. In AA, Mars, my overall record is 32-4. Yours is 35-7. Our friends over at Lohut is at 34-8 in AA. So we all got, I got to do the numbers on the winning percentage because there are some AA games I don't pick that you pick, but pretty competitive there. And A, Mars, I'm 35-10. You're 36-9, and our friends at Lohut are 36-9. So really, we're one game different. You're ahead of me, unfortunately, for that one. But I think I have a higher win percentage in AA. I only have 4 losses. But when we get to CD in the Hudson Valley Football League, this has kind of been our struggle. I'm 73-18. You're 69-16, Mars. So I'm kind of got to check the win. I don't know if you want to do the win percentage numbers on that one or while I go into the game in the first part. But let's start picking the game. I think we've reached our goal is what I'm trying to get at. But let's start with AA. First game, Mars, RCK 0-6, 0-5 at Suffern, who's 2-4, 1-4. This is a league game. And when I look at, you know, I thought Suffern played Carmel pretty hard last week. And I thought they made some really nice plays. Running back Dorcelli and Joseph kind of running out of the Wildcat and then kind of mixing it up with kind of spread concepts. I thought they did some good things. Now, let's not, you know, they did make some plays. There were a lot of penalties that Carmel had on the offensive side of the ball. But I do think Suffern is playing pretty well these last couple weeks. Defensively, this is the number 8 defense out of 14 teams in AA in points allowed. This front seven, I think, can cause some problems for RCK. And linebacker Lutz, I expect to have a big game. If they can slow down RCK running the football, I do think this defensive backfield can force a turnover to guys like Snell, guys like Harris. RCK has the 14th ranked offense out of the 14 schools in points scored, Mars. To me, I'm going to go with Suffern on this one. I think Suffern wins this game.
Yeah, I feel like I'm also going to go with Suffern as well. I feel like the RCK's offense has kind of been struggling. I think Suffern's defense has definitely stepped it up, and then, they had a tough game against Carmel against last week, and it kind of showed that they can bring the heat. They have good coaching going over there as well. I think the Suffern is going to win this game. I'm going to agree.
Yeah,
Suffern.
I like some of the concept that they brought. They brought some tricks out, which I do think showed some creativity. Let's go to the next AA game. Mars Ossining 3-4, 2-3 in league play at John Jay East Fishkill, who is 5-1, 4-1 in league play. I mentioned John Jay East Fishkill has clinched the number 2 spot. Ossining was, they really struggled to score last week. This offense is predicated on the rush attack, guys like Gallery, guys like Stella running the ball, but they're going up against a tough front seven in John Jay East Fishkill. I do think this defense has played better the last couple of weeks, but overall, they have given up 3 30-plus point games, Mars, this season. And when you look at John Jay East Fishkill, Feliciato's had a tremendous year. They do rely on him a lot. 260 yards rushing, Mars, last week, including 4 touchdowns. This young man has been a bell cow. This offense ran for 312 total yards. Running back Rossi is another guy who has kind of picked up the load running the football as well. But to me, this defense is what I like the offense. The offense has been good. I broke it down not too long ago. But defensively, Mars, the number 2 defense in points allowed out of the 14 AA teams. Defensive lineman, Maselli, Winters had a fumble recovery last week. Torres had a sack. Macia, Vanderstuff, Martini. I mean, this front seven, Crouch is another one. This front seven causes a lot of problems. And if they could slow down the rush attack of Austin and get them into second and third and long, which I think they will, I think John Jay's Fishkill is going to force a couple turnovers. They're going to run the ball effectively, and I think John Jay's Fishkill is going to win this game.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with John Jay's Fishkill. I really like the way they've been playing. Their defense has been playing top-notch. But I think the most important thing is their rush attack. I think their rush attack has been giving them a lot of opportunities on the offense because then it just opens up the playbook for them. Their offensive line has been very crucial to their success. But I just think that they are going to dominate this game. I'm going to go with John Jay's Fishkill.
Let's talk about a big Yonkers rivalry, Mars AA. Yonkers Brave 0-7, 0-6 in league play at Yonkers Force, who's 2-5, 1-5 in league play. This is a non-league game, but a big rivalry, and the Yonkers rivalry continues, which is great. When I look at Yonkers Brave, Mars, last year Yonkers Force won this matchup 12-6. Very competitive game. This rivalry brings out the best in both teams. So I do think, although Yonkers Brave doesn't have a win this season, you're going to see a high effort performance by Yonkers Brave. I believe quarterback Olkers, he's going to have to create some big plays in the passing game for Yonkers Brave this week. I do think they like to spread it out. I do think they run it, but the big thing to me is completing some big plays in the passing game and mix in some run attacks. Yonkers Force has struggled at times defending the run. Question is, Yonkers Brave is not that potent running the ball, and can they kind of dial into that and hit some big plays? It's going to be a big question mark for me. Defensively, Mars, this is the number 14 defense out of 14 AA schools. This defense has allowed 30-plus points in all 7 games this season. Now, looking at Yonkers Force, their offense is a big play offense. They have lost 5 straight, so it has been a bit of a struggle. But quarterback Martinez had a touchdown last week. Quarterback Olkers had a touchdown pass last week. And that's kind of a big thing on their offense. They run the ball with their quarterbacks. They'll hand it off. But it's, hitting some big pass plays is huge for Yonkers Force. We know about wide receiver Aquino. Jacob Henry had a big week last week, 6 receptions, 131 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But their defense as well, Mars, has struggled. I mentioned they gave up a lot of rushing yards, 300-plus rushing yards last week given up. The defense has given up 30-plus points the last 5 weeks. So to me, I'm wondering which defensive unit is going to step up this week. I think Yonkers Brave has been playing a little bit better the last couple of weeks, but I am still going to go with Yonkers Force. They're just more consistent on offense, and I think it's going to take advantage of Yonkers Brave defense, which is last in points allowed. I'm going Yonkers Force.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree. I think Yonkers Force has the advantage just because of the fact that their offense, I think, has been more consistent and they've been able to hit some big plays. They both have athletes on both these Yonkers squads, but I think that Forces has more than Brave does, and I think that they're going to give them the advantage because both defenses have been struggling, but I just think Forces offense has just been a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure, guys, you throw in those comments who you think is going to win and why.
Yeah, really tell us what you guys think. Let's see who's right here. I think my record's been doing pretty damn well, so I got to make sure I win the rest of the season.
Well, AA, I have a higher win percentage, so let's
I'll have to get that
on the record for the audience. On the record. Let's go to the next AA matchup. This one to me is an interesting one. We have Arlington, who's 4-3, 4-1 in league play, at Mount Vernon, who is 4-2, 3-2 in league play. And this game is at Memorial Field from, I believe, what everyone was telling me on social media. So this is the second game in the new stadium. Arlington 4-1 versus Mount Vernon. They have won 4 straight overall. Now let's talk about Arlington. Listen, Arlington's been running the ball very well offensively. They ran for 360 yards. Unbelievable. I mean, they have three players with over 400 yards of running the ball this season. So listen, they dish it out. They do a pretty good job of kind of splitting the pie on the rush attack. They have a 3-headed monster in Shafay, who has 442 yards rushing. Lynch has 491 yards rushing, and Resigno with 413. All of them over the 400 mark, and those stats are via Max Prep, so I hope that is up to date. But again, all those three guys are really dynamic running the football is really kind of the bottom line here. And getting them different looks and different touches is huge. And Resigno in particular, he's kind of the big home run hitter for them. But those running backs is a pretty darn good duo. Running behind that offensive line, Mars, that is big. They can move bodies. Running behind guys like Coverly and the rest of that O-line has been impressive. And you know what? Resigno has had a really good season, Mars. I mentioned the rushing, but he also has 12 touchdown passes to 3 INTs. So, listen, a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio has been really good. I mean, he has completed 54% of his passes. You probably want it to be a little bit higher, but I got to tell you, I've been impressed with Resigno overall. If you look at his full body of work this season, he's also thrown touchdown passes to 7 different receivers, Mars. We know Davenport is leading the way for them. Jordan is another very reliable target. And I think that's where they're going to attack Mount Vernon, running the football, running downhill, using all 3 of their backs, and the play action pass off of that, going into some of the spread looks and hitting a big play to guys like Davenport is going to be big. Defensively, Mars, they forced 4 turnovers last week. Perez had 2 INTs. Mackin had an INT. Henry has been very active for them defensively. To me, it's just preventing Mount Vernon from getting out on the edge because they have the speed to hit big plays as well. They have a lot of burners out there who are big play guys. Now, you got to force them to drive down the field. Don't give up those 20-plus yard plays, and I think Arlington will be okay. For Mount Vernon, I think this has got to be a big day for their quarterback and Dieter because I don't think it's going to be easy to run the football, especially in between the tackles. Now, out on the edge could be a different story. I do think they can get on the edge if they could stretch Arlington out and create some cutback lanes to guys like Hamilton, Vassell, Nazir John running the ball downhill. But they're going to have to hit some big plays to guys like Boyd to stay in this game and to potentially win this game. Defensively, stopping the run is the number one priority. These linebackers on Mount Vernon are going to have to play huge. But I don't know if Mount Vernon can do it. I do think that this will be a competitive game for a while. But I do think Arlington pulls away because of their ability to control the time of possession and to run the football. I'm going to go with Arlington, Mars.
Yeah, this was a really tough one for me. I was kind of going back and forth because the fact is, Mount Vernon gets a new whole, and you kind of mentioned this last week about being Super Saiyan because Mount Vernon turns into Super Saiyans when they play on Memorial Field, right? This brand new field kind of.
Well, based on the one game.
The juice is flowing because I know a lot of people have been kind of dying to see this stadium and bring it back and everything. And the way they revamped it was great. And yeah, I was really in between about this game because of the fact that Mount Vernon's been playing very well. And the same thing can say about Arlington. I mean, they've been playing a lot better because they've been running the ball and they have a lot of guys that can really make big plays for you. So I think the key thing is that I'm looking at this. The question I have is whether or not Mount Vernon's defense can hold up against the power running football that Arlington is now becoming more accustomed to. Right, they have the big line. They have some playmakers, in the back. I mean, and Resigno's just been playing very well. He throw the ball. He's been doing a bit. I know he's saying about 54% throwing completion, but he's a playmaker, right? He's
12 touchdowns to 3
touchdowns.
INTs.
12 touchdowns, and he can run very well. So it's gonna be really tough. But I think I'm gonna go with Arlington. I think Arlington's gonna win this game because, like you said, I think they're gonna run the ball heavily, and I want to see whether or not Mount Vernon can stand up to Arlington and this big running downhill type of play that they're going to become, more accustomed to. I mean, I think that they've been doing it very well. I want to see whether or not Mount Vernon's defense can stop that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's go to another AA matchup, Mars. White Plains, 1-5, 1-4 in league play at New Rochelle, who's 4-3, 3-2 in league play. This is another big rivalry game, Mars. New Rochelle is 16-0 versus White Plains' last 16 meetings. So absolutely crazy. And you know me, my thoughts on rivalries. They say rivalry, but to me, rivalry is when both teams win in a rivalry. So I don't want to throw shade. I'm just saying that's kind of my thoughts on rivalries. I don't like it when it's so one-sided. And one day White Plains will break through. So I'm just going to say that. But let's start with White Plains. Offensively, Mars, White Plains can move the ball. I know they're a very young team. A lot of inexperience that they've had throughout the season, but this offense has been pretty solid. They're number 6 in points scored. They have 3 30-plus point games. Quarterback Mendez has been improving. He had a rushing touchdown, passing touchdown last week. We know about one of their biggest playmakers in Graham on White Plains, who at the wide receiver spot, getting jet sweeps, throwing him the football, can be pretty dynamic. The question to me is defensively, because I do think offensively they're going to move the ball, and I do think they'll put up some points versus New Rochelle. The question to me defensively, this is the number 12 defense in points allowed out of 14 schools. They've allowed 5 30-plus point games. And New Rochelle can throw the ball. You know about running the ball with Raiden Davis. They can hit some big plays as well. Can White Plains make enough plays defensively to beat New Rochelle is going to be the big question at New Rochelle, which is always tough to win at New Rochelle. When I look at New Rochelle, Mars, offensively, they made plays last week. I mean, Raiden Davis had over 126 yards, 3 touchdowns. Luzzy, he had 225 yards passing and a touchdown. But the turnovers is what killed them. They had 4 turnovers last week. And Luzzy had an INT, fumbles. Wide receiver Dawson, he had a huge game too. 9 receptions, 180 yards and a touchdown. I mean, they have an offense when they don't turn the ball over and they're holding up in pass pro, Mars. They have an offense that can score points. They got some beef up front, and they got speed. And that combination can move the football. The question is about turning the ball over. I do think for White Plains to win, they're going to have to force some turnovers. And for New Rochelle to give this game up, I think turning the ball over at times that they do recklessly can really hurt them in the end. Defensively, it's been a little bit hot and cold for New Rochelle's defense. They're number 7 in points allowed, but they're 2-1 at home. And I do think this defense will get a boost. I do think White Plains will move the ball, but I do think New Rochelle's defense will force some turnovers, Mars. I'm going to go with New Rochelle at home, win this game to clinch a number 3 spot. I just think White Plains' defense is not consistent enough, although I am impressed with their offense. What about you?
Yeah, you know what? This was a tough game, and granted, I think that New Rochelle has probably the most to lose here because of the fact that, they're playing at home, and this is obviously a rivalry game, and they don't want to lose this and kind of be that one team. In how many meetings they had since White Plains has
16.
Yeah,
16-0 is the last 16.
And it's even crazy because I think even the year I graduated, White Plains lost to New Rochelle, and that was the year that White Plains won the whole thing. They won section title that year. So it's kind of crazy to think about that. But I think when I'm looking overall, the big question I have is whether or not White Plains' defense can hold up New Rochelle, and can they just outscore New Rochelle? Because they do have a top-level offense, but the question, like I said, is about defense. And I think that New Rochelle, even though they've had some inconsistent defensive play, and they may not be the stone wall or the Iron Curtain as they were in previous years, I think their defense is good enough to make some plays and get their offense back on the field. And if they can limit the turnovers, I think they're going to win. I think that's what's going to happen. I think New Rochelle is going to win. I'm going to go with New Rochelle.
All right, let's go to the next one. We're agreeing way too much. I think we have the same mindset right now. Let's go to AA Carmel, 6-0, 5-0 in league play at North Rockland, who's 4-3, but 4-1 in league play. This is actually the last game on North Rockland's grassy field, Mars. That brings back a lot of memories, doesn't it? This is the last game that's going to be played on the grass field. It's going to be turfed up. Let's start with Carmel. And last week, Mars probably wasn't their best performance. Obviously, with the amount of penalties that they had, they still ended up winning 25-0, but by Carmel standards, they left a lot of plays out there, and at times on both sides of the ball. But offensively, still number 1 in points scored out of the 14 schools. Very penalty riddled last week. Multiple 20-plus yard plays getting called back because of holding. Running back Warloo had 2 touchdowns last week. Roseford had 2 touchdowns last week. But I'm looking to see if this offensive line and the pass attack, who also had a turnover, is going to step up this week, right? They're going to have to play a much cleaner game. I do think North Rockland is playing some good football. So making those same mistakes that they did last week is going to hurt them. So I think, again, it's going to be got to be a much cleaner offensive performance for Carmel. And I do think, we know what they want to run the ball. Running the ball is extremely important for this offense. They want to move bodies. They want to create leverages with numbers, kind of giving you some heavy sets. But I do think, interested to see how this offensive line plays against a big front in North Rockland. Now, defensively, this is also the number 1 defense in points allowed out of the 14 schools. They had their second shutout last week. This defensive line and linebackers are a real force when they're attacking that line of scrimmage. They forced another 2 turnovers last week. And they're going up against North Rockland, who they'll hit you with the spread attack, and they'll hit you with some options out of it, right? Some read options, some power read, jet sweeps, and some play action passing game. North Rockland does some pretty cool, innovative things out of the spread for, against them. And so communication and not blowing coverages are going to be huge. That's going to be really big for Carmel. Mars, what are your thoughts on Carmel before I dive into North Rockland?
Yeah, I feel like the Carmel, it was a tough game last week. I mean, the fact that it was 6-0 at halftime, I think it was a fight. And I think that's kind of the issue that was the issue that Carmel has, is that at halftime it feels like they kind of don't really push on the throttle in the first half. And I feel like once that at halftime they realize like they need to step it up, and all of a sudden that's when you see the fire in. I think Carmel struggles sometimes to kind of realize that they need to kind of blow up the score in the beginning so that they can kind of, feel more at ease. It feels like they're looking to make games more stressful at times, but Carmel has the ability to do very well, right? And they are, because they're undefeated. But the point is that, it's going to be tough at a certain point when you're meeting a team that's your size, that you now have to outcompete them in the first half. And, this game is a big deal for this week for Carmel, because, they're playing a team that's going to be, pretty close in size that they are. And, North Rockland is fighting for that spot, right? They're fighting to keep in that race. And the key thing is that they're going to meet a team at North Rockland, last game on the grass, fired up. So it's going to be interesting, right? That's the key thing for Carmel, is that they need to come out firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to North Rockland. I do see a question by Mr. Chicken. Are you guys cousins? We're actually brothers. So
close.
If you can tell the resemblance. Oh, close. You're almost there. But we're actually brothers. When I go to North Rockland, Marson, I actually have some tape that I do want to share on North Rockland. Offensively, they scored 30-plus points in 2 out of the last 3 weeks. I felt like this offense at times was just, they're a very rhythm-based offense and couldn't get into a consistent rhythm. But the last couple weeks, they've played much better. And last week, they were hitting some big plays in the passing game. Quarterback Italiano, 6 of 10 for 202 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I do think this offense starts with the running game, and that's with guys like Savor running the football, who I believe he's leading the team in rushing. Freddie Vasquez, he had that 82-yard touchdown reception last week. Very versatile back for them. He acts as an H-back. He goes into the backfield running the ball. He goes out for patterns. He's a very versatile offensive player for them. Wide receiver Becker is another guy. He is, I think, their most important player and could be their best player on both sides of the football. He is so vital to them as a wide receiver, tight end. He's a big play threat guy for them. Farrar is another guy getting on jet sweeps and catching the ball. He also made some plays. This offense does different things. I mentioned before, some read concepts, some play action pass stuff, screen game. They do some cool things, and they really keep defenses on their toes when they are getting into rhythm. Defensively, again, Becker is a big playmaker for them on the back end. I mentioned Farrar is another guy, but they have to stop Carmel's rush attack. It has got to be their number one priority. Linebacker Visciano, leading tackler Hernandez, another linebacker who's very active, defensive end Vasquez. This defensive front seven is going to be huge to try to stop Carmel, Mars. If they can't, and Carmel is just running the ball down their throat and controlling time of possession, it's going to be a long day for them. What are your thoughts on North Rockland?
I think North Rockland has a lot of ways to attack you, right, from the offense perspective, and I feel like they've definitely revolutionized the way their offense is run. It used to back when back when we both played, they were more kind of narrow in their focus, and they were being more downhill run and just run you over in a lot of ways. But they've changed the way they played, and now I feel like they're more dangerous. They can do a lot more, and I think that their offensive line up front is really going to what drives them going forward. And their defense is going to be tough. They got some speed, they got some strength. It's a deadly combination if you don't know how to attack them. So I think that North Rockland does have a lot of weapons behind them, and I think that's going to be dangerous for this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do want to share kind of some North Rockland tape that I have. And so, Mars, do you mind if just sharing my screen real quick? Just kind of talking about kind of North Rockland. These are just a very small sample size. And shout out to Damian Santiago in the chat. These are just a small sample size of North Rockland and kind of the stuff that they do. And I actually liked watching their offense. I'm a defensive guy, but I always like watching how to stop different offenses. And I admire some of the creativity and some of the stuff that other offenses do. And so I just kind of let me know when I am.
Yeah, you're good to go.
I'm good to go. All right. Let me see. Bear with me for a minute.
Yeah, you're good to share.
Okay. Let me share real quick. Okay. Bear with me, guys, while I do some technical stuff here. Okay, cool. All right. So here we go. So this is the North Rockland set, right? This is one of the formations that they come out with. 2 backs. I mentioned they have a lot of versatility at the back spot. 3 wide receivers, and this running back is kind of an H-back who will block. He'll be a lead blocker for him. He'll go out for patterns. He's a very important player for them. And I like this little play that they have right here. It's a counter play, right? But you're going to see this H-back he's not even going to replace these linemen. He's actually going to go out to the flat. And they're going to run backside. You can see these 2 linemen pulling. And the reason why he's doing this is to kind of draw the linebackers' attention, right? They want to create numbers inside here, right? They want to have more blockers than you have defenders, and they want to draw the defenders' eyes away from where the actual ball carrier is. Right? And when you see this play get started, right, the quarterback actually takes a couple steps this way, looking like it's going to be a pass play, right? Because this looked like he's going out for a pattern, but he's actually going to hand it backside. And these linemen are pulling that way. Look at this linebacker, right? He's bailing out for what potentially could be a sweep or a pass, right? But these linemen are coming back, and this back is coming back. Now that linebacker leaves the box. So now this defense has 1 less defender in the box. And you can see, nice block here. They got some movement at the play side on those down blocks. This defender does a good job splitting this double team right here. But Savor, the running back, is a talented runner. He can make people miss, and he is fast. So right, he makes that first guy miss, and when he has space like this, looks like they're closing in, but this is speed right here. Big time speed. But they do that. North Rockland's going to kind of draw your eyes into different direction, what we call eye candy. That's what they say, defensive coaches, that they give you different eye candy to kind of draw your eyes away from where it's supposed to be, right? And that creates lanes. Now, I know this is a little bit blurry. It ended up being an 11 pro set. This receiver was out to the right. He's motioning inside, right? But he's not going to go all the way across. He's actually going to come back. But they want this defense to kind of slant, thinking that he's going to cross this pattern. And what they're going to do is you're going to see some crossing patterns right here, right? You're going to see these 2 receivers come across the field, and this tight end Becker right here, he is going to drag in front of the linebackers and clear these 2 guys. Right, and that's where they want to target, right? They want to create some different crossers and see if the defense and linebackers are going to pick this guy up, right? But again, look at the different eye candy. This guy bubbling out, running back coming through the line. These guys coming across the field, and they're trying to get a throwback here. The linebacker actually jams the tight end, but no one ends up running with them, right? No one ends up running with them, creating this open space. And if you get Becker the ball in this space, he can really hurt you. Right? So another cool little eye candy. They're getting some motions, but not all the way across. They're bubbling back, and they're getting crossers from guys like Becker, opening things up. Right? My final play right here, getting the running backs involved. And they do this as well. And so I wish there was a better angle for it, but you actually have Becker in the slot here. He's going to come across the field. And now when teams see Becker, they're saying, we got to take him away. They're going to do a little bit of play action. And this running back right here is actually going to go up the seam. Right? So teams that like to generate pressure, if they don't account for the running back, this can open things up. And you're going to see they had the play action, back is going into the flats. They're putting this guy into conflict right here. This guy's bailing out to stop this crosser, and it opens things up. Wide open. Nice catch right there. Ends up being a touchdown. I mean, North Rockland does some cool things offensively, and they really like to mess with defenses' eyes, which is kind of the big thing that this offense likes to do from my perspective. But that's it for that. Mars, I'm not going to pick this game, but tell me, who do you think is going to win and why?
Yeah, I feel like and I said this before, I feel that North Rockland has a lot of very interesting methods of scoring and moving the ball around. And obviously that their defense has been playing well. And Carmel obviously has been dominating. But the key thing that's a big difference between Carmel of last year and this year is that Carmel of this year needs to kind of really step it up right in the beginning of the game and just keep driving and pushing on the gas pedal. Because, as I said before, if you meet a team that's on equal size and equal talent, the problem's going to be about can you make a comeback or really, bust the game open, right? And I think that's going to be a big question in this game, because now you're meeting up against offensive line and defensive line that match your size, right? And I think Carmel, still has the advantage because of the way their offense and defense have been playing, but it will be a very interesting game. I'm going to go with Carmel. I think Carmel's going to win here. I think they are going to have that perfect season in the regular season, and they're going to try to go into the playoffs with momentum. But the question is going to be whether or not they step up right in the very beginning and just press on that gas pedal, right? I wonder if this game is going to start out very, very slow, very close, and then does Carmel pull away, right? That's going to be the key thing that I'm going to wonder. But I think it's possible that they can have a big game in the beginning, but it's been tough to see. It's hard to do against this North Rockland team.
Yeah, it has. And I just want to say what's up to everybody in the chat. Appreciate you guys commenting. Make sure you guys give that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Put in the comments who you think is going to win. Any questions you have that we can answer, we will. Let's go to last AA matchup, Mars. Scarsdale 4-2, 3-2 in league play at Mamaroneck, who's 6-0, 5-0 in league play. This is another rivalry game. Mamaroneck is 7-6 versus Scarsdale last 13 meetings. Last year, Mamaroneck won 24-21 in a very solid game. And when we start with Scarsdale, offensively, this is the number 5 offense in points scored. We know quarterback Baldwin is the spark plug of this offense and really the engine of this offense. He had a passing touchdown last week, but he's not alone. I mean, there's others that have been stepping up, which has been really important. Can't just be on Baldwin. If they're going to beat a team like Mamaroneck, they need multiple guys who are going to contribute. Del Gucercio, I apologize for butchering his name, the fullback, he's been really strong for them running the football week in and week out. Killian last week had a really strong game, had a rushing touchdown. He made some big running plays. And to me, attacking Mamaroneck on the edge has got to be the top priority, and counter action. You saw the video that I broke down on a counter play. They got to give Mamaroneck some, getting the linebackers and defensive linemen to kind of stare into the backfield or stare at the wrong read. They got to give some counter action, which is going to be huge for Scarsdale. And Scarsdale has done some of that, whether it's some twist option stuff, whether it's some counter action, counter powers, quarterback counters, running back counters. Those are going to be big in this game for Scarsdale to try to generate some big plays. The question I have for defensively, this defense, they're not very big, and when you look at them, they're a bit undersized. But number 4, Morrison, points allowed, undersized, but they can move in space. They run to the ball. They're very active. They do struggle with teams that are just going to power and run you over, but they've done a good job of generating negative play in key moments, forcing turnovers. And I've been impressed with Scarsdale defense. You can tell they're not the biggest guys, but they flow to the ball and they rally. And those are stuff that you can work with. And so to me, can they match up with some of these Mamaroneck wide receivers? Because I think the focus has to be, they got to create some penetration up front. They got to use their speed, generate some negative plays in the running game, where Mamaroneck is just going to try to hammer them all the way down the field and throwing in some play action and RPO. But stopping the run's got to be top priority. Mars, thoughts on Scarsdale before I go to Mamaroneck?
Yeah, I feel like Scarsdale has, a really good athletic team all around, and they do a very good job of rallying to the ball, especially on the defensive side. And I think that they have impressed me definitely this season to see how they played against some bigger teams, against some faster teams who I thought that they didn't really weren't going to match up well against. Right? And one of those examples was Arlington, right? And they matched up. They played very well, and I think that they are a surprising team in that way where you might think they might not be able to match well, and all of a sudden they do, right? And I think that they all around, offensively and defensively, they show some grit behind the way they play. So I am impressed so far with how Scarsdale is.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at Mamaroneck offensively, the number 2 offense, very dynamic, very balanced. But to me, I think running the ball is going to be top priority in this game as well, and running with power. And that starts with running back Hamilton. Had 170 yards last week and a touchdown. He's had a really strong season. But also Cox running the ball. I mean, he had 56 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns last week, but 10 of 13 passing. So you see that efficiency. And they do a lot of RPO action, some quick hitters. And then when the play action pass comes in is when they'll try to take some deeper shots, when it's kind of when they're faking counters and when they're faking some power runs or some dives. So they kind of mixed up between the quick hitters and that play action deep shots. And Cox has been very efficient. Chambers is another guy who's been really reliable for them. And they got to kind of hammer Scarsdale down, and the play action will open up for them, I believe, if they can just stick with the run, don't get too cute, and don't turn the ball over. If Mamaroneck is loose with the football, they're going to give Scarsdale extra opportunities. So being smart with the football is going to be extremely important. Defensively, Mars, number 3 defense in points allowed. They do give up yards the last couple weeks. They've been giving up a lot of yards. Last week against New Rochelle, 25 points. So it hasn't been their best performance last week. But what they did great, forced turnovers. They forced 4 turnovers last week. Alvarado had the INT to seal the game. Glinsky, he was very active for them. We know about guys like Alker, who's been really strong for them in this back end. Ramsey at the linebacker spot. But this is responsibility football. They have to have guys on the quarterback at all times. They have to be smart with their eyes. Again, don't just stare into the backfield. Make your read your keys is going to be extremely important. And you got to be able to play some man coverage because, again, some of the RPO action is going to be, quick slants, stops. So you got to be able to play some man and run with these guys is going to be the big one for playing against playing against Scarsdale, excuse me. Again, responsibility football is going to be the big one. Stopping Scarsdale, getting out on the edge. And then Kobe Baldwin has been really good. Again, they don't ask him to pass a lot, but he's been really good going off of some of that play action game. And again, he's just an athlete. Like he's just going to bomb it out to some of his receivers. And they had some open guys last week. So again, being really smart with your eyes is going to be big for Mamaroneck. Mars, what are your thoughts?
Mamaroneck is definitely a deadly team, and they have a lot of weapons that they can really just do anything they want. And defensively, they've been very impressive as well. And I do agree that playing against Scarsdale, it's a big time to be as disciplined as possible. Right, because they're going to try to get you in a lot of those different types of options. And on top of that, they're just a gritty team. So Mamaroneck needs to really step it up. This is a big game for them this week, and just to see kind of how the playoffs are going to look going forward. But I think this is going to be a very interesting game between these two, really well coached and just well played teams.
What do you have winning, Mars?
This is a tough one, but I feel like. You're looking at Scarsdale, they just have been, like I said before, they impressed me a lot of times this year. And I think that they have done a great job at really competing with these top level teams. Mamaroneck has been, the most impressive because they have been, top level offense, as well as being a top 5 in defense as well. A lot of weapons, a lot of ways that they can hurt you on the offensive end, and defensively, just a lot of athletes that could stop anybody. I was really leaning toward Scarsdale, thinking that they could maybe possibly pull an upset. But I just can't. I think I'm going to go with Mamaroneck. I think Mamaroneck has too many weapons. They're going to run the ball effectively. You have a lot of guys that can really make big plays. And Scarsdale being as gritty as they are is great. But I just think they don't have enough to really slow down this high-powered offense. And I think that it will be a close game, but I'm going to go with Mamaroneck.
I'm going to go with Mamaroneck as well. I agree with you. I think they're going to run the ball efficiently. I think they'll make enough plays on the defensive end to keep Baldwin in the pocket. Let's go to the A games now, Mars. That was all the AA games. Let's go to the A. First one, Mapac 3-3, 2-3 in league play at Clarkstown North, who is 2-5, 1-4 in league play. This is Clarkstown North's homecoming game, but in recent memory, Mars, we have to be very honest. Mapac has owned this matchup. They're 8-1 versus Clarkstown North in the last 9 meetings. And this is, that's the second most wins that Mahopac has had since 2004, right? So they've kind of owned this matchup, right, if we're looking at historically, back all the way up 18 years, right? So let's start with Mahopac. They have scored, again, Mahopac needs to win this game. They lose, the playoffs are out, right? So they have to win out. They have to win this game on the road. Offensively, they have scored 101 points the last 2 weeks. And again, last week was the Koch show. I mean, let's be honest here. Running behind an offensive line, which not too long ago was maligned, even in the newspaper about, not stepping up and not winning the battle up front. Last 2 weeks, they've absolutely done that. I mean, we always knew they had size, but again, the offensive line deserves a lot of credit, and the Koch brothers have been pretty deadly. Joey Koch last week, 217 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, had over 40 touches. Finally, that's the volume that you need to, in big games, you need to give, right? Because he's the guy you need to feed, right? Feed the beast. And they did that, and it was successful. But I also have to give a shout out to Danny Koch, because he had a passing touchdown. He had a rushing touchdown last week, and they were down late, right? I mean, Mahopac was down late, and it was like a 3rd and 15. And Danny Koch at the quarterback spot, I think he had a scramble for about 9 yards, made it 4th and 6. And then he did a power read between Danny and Joey, and Danny pulled it and made that 6-yard gain to get the first down on 4th down, had to break a couple tackles. And that was big time. I mean, the season's practically over. You lose, right? So that was a big time play. It ended up resulting. Koch got a long run. They ended up scoring. And then, they made the stop that they need to at the end. But man, I do think Danny Koch, you saw something at the quarterback, some of those quarterback reps. I do think him getting some of those quarterback reps does create a new flavor for that offense. Now, again, I don't know the situation, not just, some of those looks with him running some power read at the quarterback spot with his brother, that's a pretty nasty, thing to cover, right? So, that's an interesting dynamic. I'm interested to see if they do that more. I think it possibly should do it more. But defensively, listen, I know we talked about the first half points, allowing only 41, but overall, this is number 12 defense out of 15 schools in A in points allowed, right? They did give up 44 last week, right? So it hasn't been smooth sailing defensively, and at times giving up too many big plays, and they gave up a lot of rush yards last week. So defensively, can they stop Clarkstown North is going to be the question. Clarkstown North's offense has struggled at times. So can they stop their running game is going to be number one priority. And feeding the Koches is probably going to be the offensive priority. I don't think it's too complicated, right? I think this is a pretty, that's got to be the game plan going into this that's been working the last 2 weeks. Clarkstown North on this side of the edge, it's their homecoming. And this is a game, it was actually the quarterfinal game last year that Mahopac won and knocked Clarkstown North out of the season to knock it over. So I'm interested to see how Clarkstown North comes out, Mars. Do they come out with pride? Do they come out and with fight? Do they try to end Mahopac's season like they did to them last year? I mean, when you ask around the league, there's not a lot of faith that Clarkstown North is going to have a chance here, but it is their homecoming, right? I mean, they do have some seniors out on this team, guys like Loudon, guys like Malizia, Lopez, Bordas, Chrissy, right? They have some veterans on this team that they need to make big plays, but offensively, they have been playing a little bit better. 28 plus points, 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Can this offensive line open up lanes for this rush attack? It's going to be extremely important. Opening up lanes against a big front in Mahopac, that defensive front, guys like Porco, the linebackers who've been pretty active, can they open up lanes? And turnovers are going to be huge. Clarkstown North has been killed by turnovers all season long. They have to be smart with the football, or they're not going to have a chance in this one. Defensively, this one is a little strange to me because they're number 13 out of 15 in points allowed defensively. The last couple of weeks, I just feel, I feel this unit could be better, right? And this is not a knock on anyone. I just think that with some of the veterans that they have, I think this is going to be a real big pride test for them to try to stop the run because Koch is coming. And if, you give him open lanes, he's going to rush for another 200 yards and he'll lose it. on your homecoming. I mean, let's just be real here. So to me, this defense is really going to have to show a lot of pride and not give up some of the big plays that they have the last few weeks. It's going to be extremely important. I do think they have some talent. They have some talented players. I mentioned some of those veterans are talented players. And so Clarkstown North is going to have to come together if they want to pull this upset off. And the big thing is, a couple weeks ago when I watched them play versus Somers, so many turnovers were happening right in the first half that it felt like kind of they waved the white flag. They got to come ready to fight for 4 quarters, or this game I think will get ugly as well. Marsh, what are your thoughts before we pick them?
Yeah, first off, I think that this is a must. Obviously, it's a must win for Mahopac because if they win, they're in. Right? I think it's as simple as that. You're going to see a team that is desperate to make sure they get this W. Right? And I think we kind of called it. We said, hey, Joey Koch will be getting the ball the most. Right? We were saying that for weeks now. And you do have to give a lot of credit to Danny Koch because him at quarterback, he made a lot of big plays.
Big plays at the end, yeah.
It made the offense very much more dynamic, and I feel like that you now had 2 athletes, at quarterback and running back positions that could basically run the ball. And Danny Koch made some throws too and they both have speed, so it's really tough to stop that. And I think that you got to give him a lot of credit because he stepped in a really tough situation when the game was on the line, and he made some plays for you. And I think that they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I do agree that the offensive line played great. I mean, they obviously look at the points. I mean, they were moving the ball, running the ball, and obviously you already know that Joey Koch is a big time talent. So the key thing is that I would be surprised if he didn't get the ball a lot. I mean, I at this point, what else what else are you gonna do there, right? And I think that the key thing, and I do agree with you. I think for Clarkstown North, this is a pride game. This is your homecoming. This is your for those seniors. This is your last home. I mean, granted, I don't know what's gonna happen after the when the playoff brackets are set, but for North, this is your last homecoming game here. So, how are you going to come out? Are you going to come out firing on all cylinders? You're going to come out flat. I mean, that's going to be the key thing. And it's a listen. We played, and it's hard to drive on a Friday night to Clarkstown North. That's a ride from Mahopac, and that's a tough game. You got
to pick your winner too, though. Who do you have winning?
I'm looking at this game. I think that, and I said this a few weeks in a row, I think that Mahopac is in desperation mode. And I think right now, based on who they played and how they played against certain teams, I would be surprised if they lost to Clarkstown North. I think that they have the ability, they have the players, the skill, and they just have the momentum. So I feel like they have the ability to win this game, and it's got to be on the backs of Danny and Joey Koch and Porco.
And the O-line.
And Porco, and I think if they could do that, then they'll win.
Yeah. I agree with you. I actually am going to go Mahopac as well. I do think that if Clarkstown North wins, I think it'd be a pretty big upset if they win. But I will say this: when you talk around a lot of people, people don't think it's going to be close in this one. I do think it'll be closer than what people think because I do think Clarkstown North will play with pride. But I think at the end, I think just they'll make they won't have enough stops in them, and Mahopac will score enough points to pull it away. I'm going to go with Mahopac. Let's go to another A matchup. Mars Harrison 6-1, 5-1 in league play at Fox Lane, who's 1-6, 1-5 in league play. Listen, Fox Lane defensively they are tough and grit, but offensively it's been a struggle. They're 14 out of 15 in points scored. They just they can't find that consistency, especially if they can't run the ball effectively. And Harrison, Mars, the number 2 defense in points allowed in A. This defense has been very impressive. 4 straight games of 7 or less points allowed. Just been sensational. McLaughlin has been an absolute ball hawk in the back end. I bet he forces another turnover this week. And this offense, quarterback Citro, 7-12 last week, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns, also 78 rushing and 2 touchdowns. It was nice to see him have a strong performance coming back. They rushed for 242 yards total. I'm going Harrison, Mars.
Yeah, I think Harrison's on the moment. Their momentum is swinging right now. After that big win against Rye, in which your boy picked right. I'm gonna go with Harrison here. I think Harrison's defense is phenomenal. They've been playing fantastic. I think it's gonna give them the edge here. I'm going Harrison.
Rye 6-1, 5-1 in league play at Lakeland, who's 3-4, 2-4 in league play. I mentioned Harrison needs a win to keep that 3-way tie. Rye also needs it too, going at Lakeland. And I think Lakeland, unfortunately, is beat up with injuries. They had a couple of gruesome injuries the last couple of weeks. Quarterback Leonard, 12 of 23 last week, 2 touchdowns. Jennings, we know, has had a sensational season. Perry, they're going to have to complete some big plays. The question for me, how are they going to hold up front? That's the big concern on the Lakeland side. For Rye, listen, they were dealing with injuries with their wide receivers, but I was so impressed with how the offensive line and defensive line played, Mars. They really dictated the game last week in their upset win versus South. They dominated. And that kind of O-line, D-line play, if they can continue that, they're very dangerous. I mean, let's just not kid around. Richardson had 222 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Cavatoni had 108 yards and a touchdown. So over 300 yards rushing, Mars, going up against a bit of an undersized Lakeland team. I think that's the formula, is to pound the rock and dominate up front and then get Miller off of some play action, hitting some big plays. Colt Bartlett had a huge touchdown reception last week. McSweeney had an INT. Maybe they get a little bit healthier at the wideout spot, but I think running the football is priority number 1, and they're going to win it. I'm going Rye.
Yeah, I think the Rye offensive line is really the ones that are driving this ship, especially with the way that they've been creating up lanes for this rush offense. But, AJ Miller has definitely been a top-level talent. I've always been singing his praises every single week, and I think that I'm going to go with Rye here because I think that, I agree with you. Lakeland has too many injuries. Rye, the offensive line has been playing great, and I think they will do the same thing again. I'm going to go with Rye.
Let's go to another A matchup. Sleepy Hollow, 2-5, 0-5 in league play at Somers, who's 6-0, 5-0 in league play. Listen, and for Sleepy Hollow, offensively, I've been kind of impressed with how the offense has operated. They have moved the ball pretty well overall this season. For the grand picture, had a touchdown pass last week. But you're going up against a Somers defense that is number 1 in A, right? I mean, they have 2 straight shutouts coming into this game. So this is going to be a whole different beast right here. It's difficult to run against them consistently in between the tackles. Can Sleepy Hollow get on the edge is going to be the big important thing. But the biggest problem I think Sleepy Hollow has is defensively. They're 14th out of 15 in points allowed. Somers really has been dominant the last 2 weeks, Mars. They have now looked like the favorite that a lot of people in the preseason have picked. And I think their game versus Mapac was kind of a wake-up call for them because, with all due respect, Somers probably should have won by a lot more. And the game was close for a vast majority of the game up until the end. And granted, there were some ticky-tack, flags in that game that hurt Somers. But, ever since that game, the last 2 weeks, 2 straight shutouts. Right, so this defense has stepped up, and this offensive line, to me, has really dictated up front. And you heard in their dominating performances, Pelham Polito was talking about that they want to create fear amongst other teams, and they can do that by dominating in the trenches like they have the last 2 weeks, which has been really strong. I mean, this offense is number 3 out of the 15 schools in points scored. Ravi Das has been a guy who has been becoming more and more dynamic. 4 carries for 91 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also had 4 receptions for 39 yards. He needs around 10 touches a game. He's got to get that 10 touches. He's so fast. You want to get him out in space. And I like that. Again, 8 touches, close to that 10, but dynamic when he has the ball in his hands. Fitzsimons, 8 of 12. Another efficient performance from him. Savino has also been another guy becoming a bell cow. But getting Das one-on-one is going to open things up for people. They got to cheat over coverage to him. We're having those guys in the backfield, and Ostrander is a guy who had a touchdown reception. Opens things up for other receivers, right? So those are kind of be a big one. I mentioned the defense, really dominant performance last 2 weeks, number 1 in points allowed. Kennedy is a guy who's been leading the charge on that defense. I'm going with Somers. I think Somers ends the regular season perfect.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree. I think Somers' defense has been playing very well, and their offensive line has definitely stepped it up. I just think that, Sleepy, I'm not sure if their defense can really hold up the way how efficient Somers has been playing. I'm going to go with Somers.
Brewster, 3-3, 3-3 league play at Nyack, who's 0-6, 0-6 in league play. Brewster needs a win, Mars, to clinch the number 4 spot, and I think they get it this week. Perello has been really strong, 11-19 last week for a touchdown, and Fuso, 119 yards rushing. About Walters has had a strong year all season long. Thompson had a touchdown reception. I think this offense has shown that they can move the ball pretty well when they don't turn the ball over. We've seen that all season. But what has been more impressive the last 2 weeks defensively, Mars, remember, they were last in defense. They have moved up to 9th. 2 weeks ago, they were forcing turnovers that won them the game. Last week, no points allowed. Right. So if that defense can, continue to improve, that's where Brewster can bring some danger in the playoffs. And if they win this game, they're going to go at Somers for that rivalry. So that's a nice thing. I do think they get the win and clinch the playoff spot. I'm going Brewster.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Brewster as well. I think they've just been playing better. I think the fact that they have to win this game to clinch the 4th spot adds a level of importance and desperation here. So I'm going to go with Brewster because it just elevates the way they play, and they've been playing pretty damn good.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Yorktown, who's 4-3, 3-3 in league play at Clarkstown South, who's 5-1 in league play. Clarkstown South trying to get over that tough loss that they had last week, where they were really slowed down and shut down for 3 quarters and really exploded in the 4th, but couldn't make that comeback versus Rye. And when I start Clarkstown South, Mars, offensively, there was just too much pressure. I mean, you really saw them missing a really important player for them in Jack Ryan on the offensive line and on the defensive front. This front, at times, they're a strong unit even without Ryan, but you really saw them miss him last week. He's a really important player for them, and there was just way too much pressure on their quarterback Holder. And on the defensive side of the ball, Mars, they gave up over, It gave up over 200-plus yards rushing. So, again, the fronts need to step up this week. That's going to be really important, especially going into the playoffs. I mean, Holder wasn't very efficient, obviously faced a lot of pressure. He was 14 of 31, still threw for 211 yards. He had a passing touchdown, rushing touchdown, did have an INT that was big. Chris Ali, another 100-yard receiving performance and a touchdown, but protecting the quarterback is going to be so important. And going up against a Yorktown defense that brings a lot of pressures, Mars, they're going to try to take advantage of that, and especially running the ball. Myrelis, 317 yards last week, Mars, and 3 touchdowns. He is up there for Offensive Player of the Year in A, no question about it. But a lot of credit's got to go to this offensive line, too, guys like Broussage. They're going to see if they can run the ball versus South that Rye did to South last week. I mean, that's got to be the formula for them. And defensively, number 6 in points allowed for Yorktown, bringing a lot of pressure. Kane had a sack. And an INT, Vogel and 40, very active players. Interesting matchup to me, but I do think South rebounds. I think this offensive and defensive line play better this week after having a tough performance last week. I'm going to go with Clarkstown South. Offense is very dynamic. They get the protection up front. They're going to hit some big plays. Expect to see some man coverage. Yorktown likes to bring pressures, Mars. That means you got to play man. I'm going South.
I'm going to go with Yorktown. I think Yorktown's going to send the heat, and I think that's going to get to the quarterback's going to get sent a lot of pressure and cause some disruption as well as some mistakes, and I think that's going to be where Yorktown does capitalize. I'm going to go with Yorktown.
And quite another thing, Yorktown needs a win and Brewster loss to get that 4th spot. Let's go to the last A game, and that is Pelham, 5-1, 4-1 in league play at Eastchester, who's 5-2, 3-2 in league play. These teams are not very fond of each other as well. Eastchester's actually 4-2 versus Pelham. Last year, though, they lost 35-20. And let's just talk about Pelham first. Listen, 2 weeks ago, they had their game canceled, which pretty much put you in a bye week. And I kind of could tell because last week against Somers, Mars, they came out very flat. And Somers gave them a beat. And, I mean, that's what I've always nervous about with teams that have bye weeks. It usually goes one of 2 ways, that they're extremely fired up or they come out a little slow. And I thought Pelham came out a little bit slow, but now the question is how they rebound. And I do think against Eastchester, it's about running the football and running with some power, right? And so I do think they're going to rely on this offensive line, rely on guys like Mike Myers and Teddy Johnston to run downhill, whether it's counteraction, getting some double teams and some line movement, and running, whether it's off tackle, but downhill is going to be the big one. And then going into some of the rollouts and sprint outs with Callum Reed and trying to hit guys like Massarelli at the wide receiver spot for some big plays. But I think it starts with running the football and running downhill. Defensively, listen, I do think they're going to have a size advantage, but Eastchester has a lot of speed and they have some dynamic playmakers. So it's going to be extremely important. They're a very aggressive defense. They like to bring linebackers to create pressure. Luke Green is obviously the engine of that defense. but it's going to be these linebackers and Bryan and Meyer. They got to keep the quarterback in the pocket because when he gets out on the edge, he's very, very dangerous, and including their running backs when they run off tackle. I think they'll hold up pretty well in between the tackle, but it's off tackle is going to be huge, and they got to be able to tackle in space is going to be big. For Eastchester, Mars, and I'll let you talk before I give my video. I have a little video on Eastchester. Listen, they've had some injuries, some real tough injuries this year. And when you're missing Diaverse Herbert, they've been missing him since week 1 or week 2. He's a dynamic offensive player for them. He's been gone. They've been missing their linebacker Bloom, who's really important for that defense the last couple weeks. But they've responded, and I've been actually a real fan of the work that Eastchester has done this year. Their quarterback, Provenza, he had 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown last week. He's going to be so important in this game because it's going to be hard to run in between the tackles. He needs to do a really good job running through contact, getting out on the edge, and making explosive plays. And Dom Sparandino had 160 yards and a touchdown last week. He also had a sack and an INT. He was all over the field last week. He's another dynamic player for them. But I do think passing the ball this week is probably going to be where they're going to probably make their most benefit because it's going to be hard running in between tackle with the pressure and the D-line and the size of Pelham. So a guy that could create some big plays for them. It's going to be really important. Aiden Schultz has been a guy who's been so reliable at touchdown reception last week. He's becoming a dynamic playmaker and reliable target. But I'm a big fan of this defense, Mars, on Eastchester. I mean, this defensive front seven, not very big, but they have some speed to them. They do a great job creating penetration. Guys like Sorrow, linebackers. I think it was Tito, I think, is the linebacker, had to come in for Bloom. He had 9 tackles. Chiafone has been a real important player for them at the linebacker spot. He had 13 tackles. This is the number 5 defense in points allowed in A, and it's because they swarm to the ball really well, and they create a lot of pressure on your quarterback, which results in turnovers. Sparandino had that INT, and they create negative plays using their speed. The question I have is, can they hold up versus size, running downhill, isolating your defensive linemen and linebackers? That, to me, is the big question for Eastchester. But this defense as a unit, for the most part, has been really strong. I've been very impressed. Smarts, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
I mean, this is obviously a rivalry game. I mean, they're going to be, it kind of elevates the play of both teams because they just want to beat each other up, right? And I think that you have a really interesting matchup because you have Pelham who has the size, and they obviously had a tough game against Somers, but they've been showing they have a really tough team in general. They have guys who can just move people around, and they have some playmakers that can once they get into space, they can really make a lot of moves. But at the same time, you have Eastchester. Even though I had a lot of injuries, defensively they've been really gritty. They've just been tough to stop, and they've been always rallying to the ball, setting the heat. So it's actually a very interesting matchup, and obviously the fact that it's a rivalry game, like I mentioned before, just makes this even more important because now there are playoff implications. Because if Eastchester doesn't win here, then it does decrease the chances of them making the playoffs of it, and it almost eliminates them essentially, unless Mayapack were to lose. But it's gonna, now it's like almost you have to hope for another team to lose in order for you to make it. So you have to try to come away with a W here.
Yeah, and they're home, right? And they're home. So Mars, who do you got winning and why?
This is tough. I mean, I think that when I'm looking at these games, this matchup, I really do like the way that Pelham has been, has size up front. Now, granted, we already know that the Somers game was definitely one of those tougher ones to watch because of the fact that it just felt like Pelham was, either was a little kind of not awake when going on in this game. Yeah, they were really flat the way they played, and we've seen them play tougher against a lot of other teams. Yeah. And Eastchester at the same time has some injuries that will kind of cause some air of concern, because we're not sure if they can stand up to the size of Pelham. But I'm going to go surprising. I'm going to go Eastchester. I think Eastchester has the ability to win because their defense has been top-notch. And if, like you said, if they can hit these passes, right, get their playmakers in space and hit the passes, they'll get some ability to get a lot of points on the board. And I trust their defense to make some plays. I think even if Pelham has the size advantage, I think Eastchester's going to send the heat. I think they're going to send the heat to try to slow down this run, this rush offense, and I think they're going to get to the quarterback and cause some disruptions here. I'm going to go with Eastchester.
Yeah, before I give my pick, I almost forgot about my video. So I'm going to share my video real quick on Eastchester, and then I'm going to give my pick. So you got Eastchester. So you'll like this one. I'm talking about Eastchester's defense, and I want to make sure everyone can see the video. You guys can see it clearly.
There we go.
Yeah, so here we go. This is kind of the big question mark for me, right? Eastchester, if Pelham or any team comes out in some heavy looks, right? And so that's going to be the question on whether they can kind of, and I know it's by the goal line, but it's the same pretty much concept no matter where you are on the field, right? If they get into heavy looks, if Pelham gets into heavy looks, they bring in a tight end, more backs into the backfield. Can you bump and grind with teams that can do this, right? And so I do think at times we have seen Eastchester be able to do it, right? And so this is kind of just a straight dive play. You're going to see some double team blocks to get some movement, and these fullbacks are going to try to block this play side end and linebacker. And they're going to have to use their speed. Again, they're not a very big guys, but they got to use their speed. And you're going to see, again, they get some movement right here on this double team. Linebacker's going to have to gap replace here. And this defensive lineman, again, how he attacks blockers is going to be important. He's going to undercut this and actually beat him to the ball carrier. And plays like this are going to be huge, right? He does a real good job. He gets a nice pop right here, punches the ball out, forces the turnover. But again, it's using their speed because they're not very big. If they stand up against Pelham, right, if they don't get good leverage here, if they don't attack blocks correctly, they're going to get run over. And so plays like this are encouraging for Eastchester. This is the kind of effort. Look at the multiple bodies by the ball carrier, right? They end up recovering this football right here, right? These are the kind of plays when things get heavy, they're going to have to make, or at least hold up for the most part with some of the big linemen are going to try to push them around. Now, if they can get that, right, against some of the spread looks, even two-back looks, I do think Eastchester, they swarm to the ball. And you're going to see this front seven is very active, and they create a lot of issues. You're going to see a motion right here. They're going to do play-action pass, but you're going to get 7 guys in pass pro. And this defense really swarms to the football. This defensive lineman's got some speed. You're going to see a nice little twist stunt on both sides of the defense. And watch these guys get off. Watch them get off the ball. Watch them bend to get to the quarterback. Nice little twist there, but look at this right here, Mars. They do a good job on this side blocking up. But look at this twist right here, Mars. They're creating penetration. This defensive end does a really good job of forcing the quarterback up into the pocket. Look at him. Forces him up into the pocket into his teammates who are just fighting to get to the ball carrier. Right? I mean, these are the kind of pressures you've seen from Eastchester all year long because this defensive line can really get off the ball and attack the quarterback. And that's what's creating these negative plays. Now, when you continue to create these pressures, right? When you continue to create these pressures, what happens, Mars? You create turnovers, right? When you create these pressures, when you get the quarterbacks uncomfortable, the turnovers will come. And this is another thing you might see a lot of. 4-3 right here, right? They're going to add some extra guys into the box, try to stop the run game. Can these secondary guys hold up? And this is actually going to be a play-action pass. They're running like a cover 3 concept here where a middle safety, and again, I know he's a little cheated to this side because it's the wide side of the field, but looks like he's got the outer third, middle third, and he's got the outside third right here. And this guy is kind of in the hook to curl zone on this side. Now they're running a post corner concept here. I mean, a post wheel concept. And, this does have the opportunity to win. But look at this defensive line. Look at the get off right here, Mars. I mean, he just fires through this hole, and he's trying to blow this play up right away off this play action. And the most important part, it gets the quarterback off his spot, right? Look at him. He has to run out of the pocket, and look at this defense swarm. These guys are going to be swarm at him. Quarterback is going to rush this throw, and I love this right here. I mentioned he's standing right here on this hook to curl, right? But he's not standing still. He's not guarding empty space. He's looking for a receiver to pick up. And it's actually going to end up resulting in a turnover. Undercuts the route, INT, and this is what Eastchester has done a really good job of. They've been pretty darn disciplined, and they swarm to the football, which I really like about Eastchester's defense. Now, I talked about Eastchester's defense. I'm a fan of it. I'm a fan of what Eastchester has done. But I am actually going to pick Pelham here because I think the power is going to be a little bit too much. And my concern is blocking Luke Green, who has been really strong. I think this Pelham defense steps up from last week. This offense is going to get back to running the football. And I'm going to go with Pelham. All right, Mars, let's go to the B games. And I do see some questions. So, Mars, I do want to hit these up a little quick. Football Cutes, brother, I appreciate all these questions that you're dropping in. Thoughts on Ardsley's Ben Silverman? Well, since I'm talking about B, I'll talk about Ben Silverman. I've been very impressed with him. I mean, we're going to get to that Ardsley game pretty soon here. He's been so valuable for that offense, and you can see his role is increasing week to week. He had over 100 total yards last week, but he's a dynamic guy that you could throw to, that he can run. I've been very impressed with Ben Silverman. I do see thoughts on Dobbs Ferry, Kevin Hartnett. Kevin Hartnett, quarterback for Dobbs Ferry. It's not easy to be quarterback in Dobbs Ferry's offense. It's very difficult. You have to be able to make some smart reads. You have to show the ability to make some play action passing and to run the football. And you know what? I thought he's done a solid job. Dobbs Ferry is a very under the radar team right now. And this offense has been running the ball really well. And you have to give credit to the quarterback when the offense is running smoothly. I mean, he's the commander of that offense. So to me, he's another guy who, again, definitely things that he can improve on without question looking at the tape, but someone who's done a solid job help leading this offense. And finally, thoughts on Edgemont's Nate Parsons. I got to say this, Nate Parsons, part of Edgemont's O-line, D-line, and Edgemont has won against some bigger schools in the Hudson Valley Football League, and you can't win against those schools multiple times if you don't have good play up front. And so I'm just going to say that. You have to have some solid play up front. Nate Parsons, Edgemont's front, has done a good job of competing with schools and kids that are bigger than them. And so a lot of credit goes to them. All right, Mars, let's go to the B games. Hen Hud, 1-5 at Briarcliff Hamilton, 1-6, 0-6 in league play. This one's a tough one for me. Hen Hud, I thought, was playing pretty well until they had to forfeit the game last week, Mars. I thought the last couple of weeks they've been pretty solid. Running the football, defense has made enough plays. I'm going to go with Hen Hud. I don't know the injury status. It's a bit concerning that they had to forfeit last week. Briarcliff, to me, they have been tough and gritty, but the defense has given up 28-plus points in 2 straight games, while Hen Hud has scored 20-plus points in 2 straight games. I'm going Hen Hud.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Hen Hud as well. I mean, it definitely was surprising to see what happened with the fact that there was a forfeit. But yeah, I think it really depends on also the injuries and extent of how many of them are healthy. It seems like everyone's okay. So I think I'm going to go with Hen Hud as well because I think the defense is going to be pretty solid and they've been able to score points. So I'm going to go with Hen Hud.
Byram Hills 6-1 at Nanuet, who's 5-1. Byram Hills is 5-1 in league play. Nanuet 5-1 in league play. This is a really, really cool matchup. This is the 2 and 3 pretty much deciding it. Who's going to get the number 2 seed and who's going to get the 3 seed between these two teams. When I look at the two squads, Byram Hills offensively is the number 1 offense in B. And to me, it starts with the running game and the play action out of the running game. And this rush attack with Jaworski had 123 yards and a touchdown last week. But it's not just him. Curso at the quarterback spot, also valuable running the football. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last week. And the play action really opens up when they can run the ball. He was 11-16 for 205 yards and a touchdown last week, and he could throw to some big play guys. We mentioned Weiler. Scully had 3 receptions for 77 yards, a touchdown. Siegel, big body target. He had 4 catches for 64 yards. Byram Hill's offense at times is really, really deadly, and they're number 1 for a reason. I actually have a video on them. I'll do it at the end. Defensively, the defense has been pretty solid. There are at times that you can move the ball against them. We have seen that a few times. George Jashaj, the defensive lineman, the big man, he is so dynamic. 12 tackles, 4 tackles for loss and a sack last week. This defense had 3 INTs, and they've done a good job of preventing big plays and forcing turnovers for the most part. Jack Quinn is another guy, very active, 10 tackles last week. When I look at Nanuet, Mars, we know about this offense, right? It's very James Moran-oriented for obvious reasons. 257 yards last week, 4 touchdowns. The question has always been, who else is going to step up and make plays offensively? And when Nanuet gets that, and it doesn't have to be they take over a game. We know that it's very Moran-centric, and they rely on this offensive line to show a lot of toughness and kind of muddle up things so that Moran can find some open spaces. And I'm anticipating they're not going to change their identity, but they're going to have to hit some big plays outside Moran. They're going to have to this week, or I don't think they're going to win. And that's going to be the big question for me. They also have a good, a kicker who's been really strong all year long. Jack O'Sullivan has made a lot of, he's been very reliable, is what I'll say on that. Defensively, number 2 defense in points allowed in BMARS. This Nanuet defense coming back again. They do a really good job. They're really the epitome of the bend but don't break defense. They've done a really good job of preventing teams from scoring. They seem to tighten up, especially near the red zone. Flanagan has been very active. Mike Cesario last week was very active. They're going to have to be again this week to stop this rush attack. Very potent rush attack. This Nanuet defense is going to have to swarm to the ball. Defensive line-wise, how are they going to hold up versus some of the size of Byram Hills? Big question. But this Nanuet defense has been really strong, Mars. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, this is actually a very good game, and I think that these two teams kind of match up very well. I mean, the fact that Byram Hills is a top-level offense and Nanuet is a top-level defense is very, going to be very interesting. I think that Nanuet's biggest issue is the fact that you have Moran being the number 1 guy, but you have to see who else is going to perform to that level, or at least help him out. I mean, because the thing is, he's obviously he's the dude, right? He's going Super Saiyan every week. He's got to get some help, right? And I think that's going to be the key thing about this game, because I think Byram Hills just has a lot of weapons and they could do a lot, right? They have a lot of guys that can hurt you, so that's going to be the big, the kind of the big thing I'm thinking about when I'm looking at this game. Do you want me to make my pick, or you want to wait?
Yeah, make your pick. I'll show my video and then I'll make my picks.
I'm gonna go with Byram Hills. I think Byram Hills all around they just have more stability, more consistency with their offense and defense, and I think they just have more weapons all around. I think they have what Nanuet wants with the multitude of weapons that can make big plays. Moran is a great athlete. He's a top player. He's one of the top players in B. But I think that Byram Hills just has too many weapons for Nanuet's defense to stop. I'm gonna go with Byram Hills.
Yeah, and I'm going to show my video about Byram Hills' offense, just give the audience a couple clips on why I think they're so potent, starting with the rush attack and then play action. I'll give my pick. So let me just share my screen real quick. And again, talking about Byram Hills, it all starts with the rush attack and this guy right here, Jaworski. I mean, he is a dynamic. He's one of the best players in the class. This is not a complicated run. And there's times that they'll do some counter action, some sweep actions, but times they'll just bulldoze ahead. And this is actually going to be pretty much a dive play. You're going to see a bunch of drive blocks here. Jaworski actually bends it to the weak side. He probably should have bent it to the strength here, because the defense actually covers this up pretty well to the outside. But again, not a lot of push right here, except for Big 72, who drives this guy to the ground. But you're going to see he kind of bounces it this way to the short side of the field. You see 2 defenders here, but this is what makes this young man very talented. I mean, even when you have things bottled up, he's got the speed and power to run through contact. And just watch him go. I mean, this is against a very strong Ardsley defense. He just shoots that gap right there. And this is just strength at the end, right? He's a dynamic player, right? And every team that plays Byram Hills has to worry about this young man. And his presence really opens up this offense for a lot of different things, right? So here's another play. And again, they're motioning this H-back to this side, and they're going to do play action, but this time it's a pass out of it. So this guy's going to come out to the flats. They're going to have this guy going deep to try to clear out the secondary. And the play action mixed with, again, some of these big play guys causes issues for defenses, right? They cause conflict. And so you're going to see the play action draws these linebackers up. These linebackers have no chance to get involved now, but you're going to see a screw up right here. Not sure if they got to play man here, not sure if they're playing zone here, but this clear out opens up this throw into the flats, right? Nice little play action, get these linebackers to bite, freezes some of these players. Now it opens a real clear window to throw to the flats, and some of these playmakers can really cause damage. Splits the 2 defenders there, big chunk play out of the play action pass. When you're running the ball with Jaworski, you have to respect it. Opens things up for some of the other playmakers. And this is another example of it, right? This is practically the same play, right? They're going to motion. They're going to go out to the flats, play action. They have a deep pattern right here. The inside one's a little interesting here. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a go route or a corner, but watch this play develop. It actually ends up 2 people being open. So you're going to see play action. Watch the safety. Look at the safety run up here because he thought it was a run play, right? Because of this guy right here. Look at the eyes. right? You can see, look at the eyes, man. Everyone looking inside here. You have two wide open guys. The guy in the flat's wide open, and this guy's wide open. Now, I'm not sure he's supposed to go to the corner. He ends up going to the corner. He could have thrown this, which probably could have resulted in a touchdown as well. But look at the play action, what it does there. Opens things up. He's going to attack upfield. Nice throw. Ends up being a touchdown. I mean, those are just a small sample size of that run. You know, they can run the football, and that opens up this offense to be really dynamic. I'm going to go with Byram Hills. Just because, does Nanuet have enough playmakers on the offense side of the ball to generate enough big plays? I think Nanuet's defense is going to hold tough. I don't think this is going to be, this is going to be a close game to me, but I'm going to go with Byram Hills winning it. All right, Mars, next B matchup game. I do see a question here from Chuck McGuire. Do you think is winning the Spring Valley versus Tappan Zee? Stay tuned, Chuck. We're going to get to that game. I hope you stay for the entirety of the show. We are going to get to it. We're going through B, then we'll go to C, D, and then we'll go to the Hudson Valley playoffs. But let's continue on the B stuff. Ardsley 4-2 at Pleasantville, who's 6-0, 5-0 in league play. Now, Pleasantville's clinched the number 1 spot. Ardsley has clinched the 4 spot. So these two teams have clinched a spot, but this feels like a pretty good measuring stick, right? I do think if I'm Pleasantville, I'm a little worried about this game, Mars, and I'm not sure about your thoughts. You could tell me, but they had their game forfeited last week. Pleasantville pretty much put them on a bye week. Now they're playing against a tough Ardsley team, well-coached Ardsley team. This is a very interesting game to me for Pleasantville. And so when I look at Ardsley offensively, I talked about it before. Ben Silverman, he had 3 touchdowns last week, 2 of them receiving, 112 total yards. He has been a very reliable offensive player and a guy who's seen his role increase as the season's gone along for good reason. He's become pretty dynamic for them. Guy who can run the ball, he can catch the ball, and he's an important offensive player to help generate big plays. Quarterback Rendy, another guy that from the start of the year to now has improved, and he's been very impressive. He had 2 touchdown passes. Mike Vega, 95 total yards and a rushing touchdown. Obviously, Ardsley offense, it all starts with running the football, but defensively is kind of the makeup of this team. The number 3 in points allowed, Aiden Wells, has been really strong for them. Joe Ferraro last week was really strong at 7 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Chenard had an INT. They have multiple guys who can step up and play and make some plays defensively. They're going to have to against Picard. Again, preventing big plays from Daniel Picard is priority number 1. It's been everyone's priority, but executing it has been the hard part. And when he's out at wide receiver, they have to bracket him. They have to play zone to him. You can't play man coverage on him. You have to bracket coverage to him and force other Pleasantville players to step up and make big plays for them offensively. I think Ardsley is going to be in tough to try to run the football versus Pleasantville's front. I mentioned guys like Silverman and Rendy. Can they make some plays in the passing game is the question. For Pleasantville, again, coming off that pretty much a bye week, I'm interested to see how they come out. Do they come out flat or they come out firing? Obviously, Daniel Picard is priority number 1, running the ball, receiving the ball, getting the ball in his hands as much as possible so that he can hit those 1 or 2 Houdini plays and put some points on the board. But interested to see guys like Aiden Picard, Eric Coleman, can they hit some big plays outside of just the Daniel Picard run right and Daniel Picard run left, right? So that's going to be big. And this offensive line going up against the tough Ardsley front 7, interesting matchup right there. I'm very intrigued about it. Defensively, this is the number 1 defense, Mars, for a good reason. They're really tough to run against with this defensive line, guys like Kitsley, linebackers like Horrigan. If they can, create a lot of pressure on Ardsley, which they like to generate, they're going to bring linebackers. Will some turnovers go their way? Hudzinski has had a really strong season for Pleasantville, Mars. I'm going to go with Pleasantville. I know you're not picking the game, but give me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be, even though there are 2 definitely secured 1 and 4 between Ardsley and Pleasantville, but the key thing that I think that, and you said it right, is about momentum. How do you want to end the season? How do you want to carry this over into the playoffs? And, I think both these teams are vying for that, game to win just so they can carry themselves forward. And, from Pleasantville's perspective, this is a senior night. So, they're going to have a lot of momentum and try to at least have a lot of energy to try to come away and finish the season with a undefeated streak yet again. And I think that's going to be a key thing to see who's going to step up other than Daniel Picard. And I think Aiden Picard's been playing very well. Eric Coleman's been playing well. I mean, Emmett McDermott's another contributor on the offense, and now you have to see how this offensive line plays and how they kind of move bodies around, because defensively they've been stout. They've been kind of shutting teams down, and I think the key thing is going to see how do they match up against a lot of these weapons on Ardsley, because they do have weapons that can make big plays. And it'll be very interesting because this has become more of a rivalry of late because they've been competing a lot recently. So it's kind of interesting to see who's going to win on this last game. It's going to be a fight.
Yeah. I see a question here from C Striker 173-821. What do you think about the Tucko versus Valhalla game of last week? Tucko is playing at such a high level that, again, I knew it was going to be tough for Valhalla. But I still like Valhalla. I think, again, defensively, they're still pretty top-notch. Offensively, they have some big playmakers. But Tucko is just playing at a different level, and it starts with their quarterback. And anyone who watched that game can see that he's very dynamic. And the rush attack is really strong. They had over 290 yards, I think, of rushing against a Valhalla defense that has been very potent all season long. So it's not really so much of a knock on Valhalla, but just it's really the praise of Tuckahoe that has just been firing on all cylinders. And even though, Valhalla did score some points, they just put so much pressure on you. They get on you so early, it's hard to climb out of. So that's kind of my thought on that game last week. And Football Cute's brother asked, why doesn't Mars pick the game? Mars is part of the Pleasantville program on the JV level. And so, listen, I know we're not biased, right? So we can pick straight up, but just to avoid any thoughts of biasy, he won't be picking Pleasantville games. And so that's why we have it that way. Let's go to the last B matchup. Pearl River 2-4 at Bronxville, who's 1-6, 1-5 in league play. Listen, Pearl River, last week it was really tough for them to move the ball against a really tough Ardsley defense. Offensively, they are last in points scored out of the 8 teams. And it all starts with the running game, running behind that physical offensive line. Can they get some consistency doing that, which will open up some of the passing for this offense that just hasn't found that consistency? Now, defensively, they have been better. They're number 5 out of 8 schools in points scored. They're going up against a Bronxville team, Mars, that has had such devastating losses. I felt like the win was kind of taken out of their sail last week, Bronxville. And so I'm interested to see them bounce back at home. This offense is still number 3 in points scored, even though they struggled to score last week. The question is defensively, can they make enough plays on the defensive side of the ball? I think they will. I'm going to go with Bronxville here, and I think it's because both these teams are pretty close, and I'm going to give the advantage to the home team. I'm going Bronxville.
Yeah, this is obviously, the fact that Bronxville's lost a lot of close games, sometimes that sticks with you, right? When you're a player and you're like, hey, why can't I win? Why can't we finish and close? But I think this week Bronxville will close. I think they will win this game. I think they are a solid team that has just been losing really tough games against some really good opponents, right? And I think that's kind of the key thing. I think they need to kind of just right the ship and just make sure that they kind of close out a game, because they've always been there. They've always been competitive, right? They just need to kind of close this out. I'm going to go with Bronxville.
Let's go to the C games, Mars. Westlake 4-2, 3-0 in league play at Valhalla, who's 5-1, 3-0 in league play. Really interesting matchup, these two teams. League game, this is kind of going to decide who the number 1 and number 2 seed is. Westlake, they're number 3 in points scored out of the C&D schools. 3 players last week who rushed for over 50 yards are Archiello, Osapinti, and Knapp, all over that mark. Archiello had 152 yards rushing. Their quarterback, Pagan, he had a passing touchdown and rushing touchdown. Callie, he had 2 receptions for 36 yards and a touchdown. Again, we talked about this week after week. Westlake has multiple guys that they can turn to on a week-to-week basis to make some big plays. And so that's tough for a defense to slow down. I mean, and to me, that means Valhalla's got to win up front. And that's going to be the hardest part, because Westlake has a lot of speed, so Valhalla has to create some negative plays, and that's by winning in the front 7. And so that's what's going to be interesting. Valhalla gave up over 250 yards rushing last week, so Westlake is going to test it. Defensively for Westlake, can they prevent giving up big plays? Because Valhalla's offense is number 2 in points scored. Their running back Foysette's had a very strong year all year long at 112 yards rushing. We've seen at times Westlake gets given up rush yards. I think Valhalla's got to take advantage of that and get guys like Basiaka Butcher out on the edge, because he is a guy who can wreck games. But if they can run the ball, Valhalla, This could be an opportunity where play action pass will also be big, but it starts with running the ball. Westlake at times has given up some big running plays. Defensively, listen, it was tough last week, I mentioned, against Tucko, but their ability to stop the run is going to be huge. And again, protecting the edge is going to be big. This Valhalla defense is still number one in points allowed. So this is still a strong unit. How do they deal with the speed of Westlake? I think this game is going to be very close. Valhalla's got to rely on the defensive line and Chillo and these linebackers, but I am going to go with Westlake in a tight game. Listen, I have a lot of respect for Valhalla. I think they're a very potent team, but I do think giving up those rush yards that they did last week, I think Westlake could take advantage of that coming into this week in game planning for this week to get out on the edge. I'm going Westlake.
I'm going to go with Valhalla. I think the Valhalla is going to have the ability to win this game because of the fact that their offensive defensive line are going to play a lot better. I think that's going to be the key thing that drives this game going forward because, like you said, Valhalla has a lot of weapons in backs that can really make a lot of plays and get open space. And so does Westlake. I mean, Westlake has a lot of good backs too, but I think it's going to be a really close game. I think Valhalla is going to pull off in the end. I'm going to go Valhalla.
C matchup, Croton Harmon, 2-4, 0-3 in league play at Albertus Magnus, who's 3-3. This is a league game. Listen, Croton Harmon, Jacob Jones was really good for them. He had 3 touchdowns. Alex Matthews had a receiving touchdown. The offense woke up, and defensively, they had their first shutout, I think, in around 11 years. And Calmieri had 8 tackles to lead the way. Jack Nussbaum has been a real disruptive player for them on the defensive line. He had a sack last week. Carney had a sack. Ben Reed. I mean, it was a strong performance on both sides of the ball last week. But you're going up against Albertus Magnus, who has won 3 straight. This offense has 30-plus points, had 2 out of the last 3 games. And they've been creative, Mars. LaRusso, Jacon Johnson had multiple touchdowns last week. They've done a good job of getting their playmakers the ball. They've been creative offensively. Defensively, number 4 in points allowed amongst the C&D schools. I'm going Albertus Magnus.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Albertus Magnus. I think their momentum is in their favor. I think they just have a lot of weapons. I think Croton Harmon's going to have some difficulties trying to slow them down. I'm going to go with Albertus Magnus.
CD matchup, Rhinebeck, 1-5, 1-2 in league play at Tucko, 6-0. Listen, Rhinebeck is a team I think has played a lot better in the second half compared to the first half of the season. But I talked about it before. Tucko is playing on a different level. I'm going with Tucko. Annunziata, 8 of 12, 149 yards, 3 touchdowns, also 151 rushing and 2 touchdowns last week. Mars Smith added another 145 on the ground. Too much firepower. I'm going with Tucko.
I'm gonna go with Tucko. I know Rhinebeck.
Why do that to them, man?
I always support Rhinebeck Nation, but the key thing is that Rhinebeck. I just think Tucko has been on a kind of a warpath this season. I think they are kind of just the momentum is riding high. They're just dominating a lot of teams and they're playing up and they're just winning, right? So I think that Tuckahoe is going to win this game. No offense to Rhinebeck. I just think Tuckahoe just has the weapons and then they have the momentum.
Let's do Dobbs Ferry, 5-1, 2-1 in league play at Woodlands, who's 1-6, 1-2 in league play. Listen, Woodlands is another team that's, trying to find consistency. At times, I think they play pretty strong, and then at times, they give up way too many big plays. And looking at Dobbs Ferry, very under-the-radar team. This offensive line is moving people. This rush attack has been strong. Brandon Holman and Brian Dan, a good combination running the football. I mean, I'm going with Dobbs Ferry, and people should keep an eye on Dobbs Ferry. Very quiet, 5-1. How about Lewis, the defensive back for Dobbs Ferry? Has 8 INTs this year. Extremely impressive. I think they forced a couple turnovers. I'm going Dobbs Ferry.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Dobbs Ferry. I always liked them this season. I thought that they were going to, kind of run the table, but it's been a lot more competitive than I thought originally. And Dobbs Ferry's offensive line has been definitely driving the force here, but their rush offense has obviously just been stout, and obviously Brian Dan has been, kind of been the guy. But, this offensive line's really been pushing bodies around. I'm going to go Dobbs Ferry.
CD matchup, Putt Valley 2-4, 1-2 in league play at Haldane, who's 4-2. Listen, Putnam Valley really relies on this rush attack that has to drive this offense, which allows for some of the play action pass to be there. Listen, Caden Glenn has been a young guy who's been getting better and better each week. When I look at Meister and this rush attack, that's got to be the number one priority against Haldane. I think they'll have a bit of a size advantage versus Haldane. But I tell you what, Haldane is a scrappy team. So they just find different ways to stay in games and win. Last week wasn't their best defensive performance, but offensively they stepped up. Evan Gianchinta, He had, over 150 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. Van Tassel also had a couple touchdowns. I think they make enough plays defensively to win this game. I'm going Haldane.
Yeah, this was a tough one for me. I'm going to go with Haldane as well. I think they just have enough, skill players to kind of push this game forward. Pope Valley has been having, they've been playing better, but they've also had some struggles as well. I think the Haldane is going to win this game. I'm going to go Haldane.
Blindbrook, 1-6, 0-3 in league play at Irvington, who's 3-3, 2-2 in league play. Listen, Blindbrook can move the ball. I mean, Jake Minnick had 265 yards passing and 2 touchdowns last week, including a rushing touchdown. JPD and Verno, 12 catches. This offense, again, pretty potent, but defensively, the number 12 out of 12 teams out of C&D schools in points allowed. And Irvington with Ken and Balkan, it's been a solid combination. I know they've been dealing a little beat up as well, but I'm going Irvington.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Irvington as well. I know that Blindbrook has been playing decently, and then the fact that they can move the ball is pretty nice to see, but I'm going to go with Irvington. I think they're going to win here. Let's
go to the Hudson Valley Football League playoffs, Mars. First one up, number 4 seed Ramapo at number 1 seed Walter Panis. Listen, Ramapo, it's hard to determine which Ramapo team you're going to see at times. They play some really strong defense and generate some explosive plays on the offensive side of the ball. Maid had a passing touchdown. On the defensive side, Nico Sanchez had 2 INTs. But Walter Panis coming off a loss in overtime versus Greeley, I think they're going to be fired up. I mean, Ranga has been really good for them this whole season. He had over 100 yards rushing and a touchdown, 2 INTs. He was a playmaker on both sides of the ball. Carlucci had a couple turnovers. I'm expecting him to have a real bounce-back game, be really explosive in this one. And keep an eye on a guy like Randy Weisner, very active on this defense. This defense is still number 1 in points allowed in the Hudson Valley Football League, Mars. I'm going to go with Walter Panis. I think Ramapo offensively at times turns the ball over a little bit too much and just can't find consistency on that side of the ball. I think Walter Panis' defense is going to kind of go into some lockdown mode and they'll score enough. I'm going Walter Panis.
Yeah, I'm going to go Walter Panis. I think Ramapo has been inconsistent, too inconsistent for my taste. And I think Walter Panis has kind of been rolling. They've been, I think running the ball pretty well. Their offensive line's been playing a lot better throughout the season. I'm going to go with Walter Panis here.
Let's go to the next matchup. Number 3 seed Tappan Zee at number 2 seed Spring Valley. This is for Chuck. I know he was asking about this before. Listen, this is actually, I think, the most intriguing matchup of the Hudson Valley Football League this week. Tappan Zee offensively, they're number 5, right there in the midway point out of the 10 schools, and it really relies on this rush attack to get going. I mean, they rushed for over 230 yards last week. It starts with guys like Brown, who had 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. McCarthy had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Running the football is the priority for Tappan Zee, and I think they got to against a Spring Valley defense that is fast, not very big, right? So they're going to have to try to muscle them down, run the ball, keep the time of possession. But defensively, Tappan Zee's played solid defense. They're number 2 out of the 10 schools in points allowed. They have to prevent the big plays that Spring Valley can hit. Because when you look at Spring Valley, they have speed. Offensively, they're the number 3 offense in points scored. Quarterback Scott was sensational last 16 of 18, Mars, with 246 yards and 5 touchdowns. We know about Noah Chambers running the football, very dynamic runner. They have weapons. I mean, Sutherland had 2 receiving touchdowns. We know about Vargas, another weapon that they have. The question is up front, right? Can those guys block when they're trying to pass the ball and run the ball? I do think Spring Valley's going to try to get on the edge, and can Tappan Zee match that speed? Question I have is defensively, right? Number 5, not bad out of 10 schools. It's aggressive style defense. They like to bring pressure. They like to bring stunts, bring outside guys, inside guys to try to generate negative plays. But that's hard to do when Tappan Zee tries to run right at you, right? So it's going to be interesting to see that matchup. I'm going to go with Tappan Zee. And I do think I'm going to go with Tappan Zee because I do think they're going to be able to run the ball and control time possession, reduce the amount of possessions that Spring Valley has. I think this game will be close. It's in Spring Valley, but I'm going Tappan Zee, the road team.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Spring Valley. I think the home field advantage is going to give them a lot more momentum. I think that they will get into space and score some points, and I think they're going to send the heat to try to slow down any sort of rush attack. I'm going to go Spring Valley.
Yeah, question I have, Tappan Zee pass attack and make a couple plays. Let's go to the next matchup. Hudson Valley Football League playoffs. Hastings, number 4 seed at number 1 seed Greeley on the other side of the bracket. Listen, for Hastings to pull off this upset, Mars, their quarterback Kennedy is going to have a big game. Now, this offense, 22-plus points, 2 out of the last 3 games. Going to have to hit some big passes. And Greeley does give up yards, right? But can you match the firepower that Greeley has? And what Greeley does good defensively is forcing turnovers. And so That's been an issue for Hastings, is turning the ball. If they turn the ball over, they lose the turnover battle, they're going to get blown out. So it's going to be really important for Kennedy and this offense to hit some big plays and be smart with the football while being aggressive. Another concern I have is defensively. Hastings is number 9 out of 10 schools in points allowed. When you look at Greeley Mars, the number 1 offense out of the Hudson Valley Football League, Jamison Blakesley, dynamic wide receiver, he had that game-winning touchdown in overtime. You know about the quarterback, Osh, multiple touchdowns. He did throw a couple INTs, though. When Greeley is smart with the football, they are very dynamic. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball. McKinney has been so good for them. He had a receiving touchdown and an INT. Really strong two-way player for them. This offense is dynamic. They're going to spread Hastings out, try to get on the edge, do some play-action game. I think they're going to move the ball and score some points. The question for me defensively, number 4 defense, right? It's not a bad defense, but they do give up yards, and they will give up at times the edge. So, but they'll force turnovers. I mentioned McKinney had that INT. Forster had an INT. This defense forces turnovers, gives their offense extra possessions. I'm going to go with Greeley. I think the formula is too strong for Hastings.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. I think Greeley has just the offensive firepower to score on will at times, and I think that Hastings needs to be super consistent and really drain the clock out in order for Greeley to not score as many points. But I don't think they're gonna be able to pull it off. I think Greeley's gonna win here. They're gonna just score a lot of points, and I just don't think Hastings will be able to keep up.
Let's go to last playoff matchup, Mars. Number 3 seed Portchester at the number 2 seed Edgemont. Another interesting matchup to me. Portchester has won 4 straight. This offense has scored 29-plus points now in 4 straight games. This rush attack has been strong. Colin Taylor, Polanco running behind this offensive line, and Barber. They have been really good. I mean, they have generated a lot of points. They have hit some explosive plays. Portchester's playing some good football, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they started off really slow, but this defense has moved up now to number 6 defense out of 10 schools in points allowed. They got to stop the big plays from Edgemont. And when I look at Edgemont, listen, quarterback Milan Giulianardo is the spark plug for this offense, but I saw this comment before by Romboy, Peter Olinkos, underrated running back. He is 100% right. He has been so good for this Edgemont team. Running the football overall, both sides of the ball, but on the offensive side of the ball has been a real big boost for this offense, and a credit to this offensive line too. Again, I mentioned it before, competing with some of the bigger schools, you have to be able to compete in the trenches. And that combination, Giulianardo, Olinkos, guys like Davis Kim, who can hit big plays in the passing game, but you got to win up front. That's going to be the question. Can Edgemont dictate up front? If they do, I think they have a real good chance of winning. Defensively, Mars, number 3 defense in points allowed. I think this is the difference in the game. Thomas Russo had an INT for a touchdown. They had a safety last week. I'm going to go with Edgemont, and it's because defensively, I think they hold Portchester just enough, and Edgemont will hit a couple big plays. I'm going Edgemont. I know this might be an upset, but I'm going Edgemont.
Yeah, you know what? I was really kind of really contemplating this game because of the fact that this is a pretty close matchup all around. I think that I'm going to go with the favor. I'm going to go with Portchester on this one. I think even though Edgemont has, definitely has some weapons.
The higher seed. Edgemont's the higher seed.
Well, you're saying it's a surprise. I mean, I'm going to go Portchester then, because the key thing is that I'm not going to go with this this favorite that you're giving me here.
It's the seating. The seating is higher. I'm just saying, Portchester, bigger school.
Overall, these guys are more equal than what Frank's talking here. I know that we got some skill players in Edgemont, but don't be throwing Portchester under the bus. I'm gonna go with Portchester. I'm gonna go with the Rams here. I'm gonna say that they're gonna make an upset. Then they're gonna shock the world here in this playoff game. I'm gonna go Portchester in this matchup.
We'll see about that. Let's go to the last game, and this is the Hudson Valley Football non-playoff league game, and that is Poughkeepsie 0-6 at Peekskill, who's 0-6. Both teams trying to get their first win, Mars. I think both evenly matched. Listen, Poughkeepsie has some talented football players. I know, they have Rashawn Davis, who's an active player for them. They have some playmakers on the offensive side of the ball that have created some big plays. But I like the way Peekskill's kind of been playing the last couple of weeks. I know it hasn't shown up in the win-loss record. The offense has been improving. I think when it's 2 even teams, I'm going to go with the home team. I'm going to go with Peekskill this week, Mars.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Peekskill. I think that at the home field is going to give them some motivation to try to get a W here and try to get their first win on the column. And I think obviously this is going to be a closer game, but I'm going to go with Peekskill as well.
that was all the games, guys. I mean, we went through all of them. Really appreciate you guys joining the show. I hope you guys enjoy this weekend. I know if you have any questions, we are taking last kind of second stuff. We want to thank you guys so much for being in the chat, contributing. Make sure you guys give a thumbs up and subscribe. I know the last question we didn't answer was the top 5 coaches. And Mars, I think to reduce time, I will give some coaches and you agree with me or disagree. I do think Todd K has to be in the top 5, no question. I think Arsley's coach, Dan DeFalco, has to be in the top 5. I do think give me any coaches that come to mind too, and I'll tell you if I agree with you or not. But those two, do you agree so far?
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to think. I think Scarpelli, I know that some people might think I'm crazy. Of Clarkstown South. Dino Gar obviously deserves in the top 5. So I have Clarkstown South. I think Scarpelli's kind of the underdog going into that top 5. So that's 4. And what would be my 5? Again, that was not in the direct order, but my 5th. There are some young coaches that I do think need to prove themselves a little bit longer, I think. Coach Vitti. Listen, I did tell you what, the last couple seasons, Coach Vitti has really done a tremendous job. This is why this question's so hard. I mean, I think he's done a really good job. Does he crack my top 5? This is something I probably need time to think on, honestly, because
this is more of
a hard
question.
One.
You have to really analyze a lot of components to really finalize it. It's almost like when we do our end of the year, our end of the year top 5, cog molly groups and stuff like that. I mean, like that. This is kind of like the time when you do that. I mean, it's a great question to go into the top 5 coaches because it's a it's tough. Sometimes you do it for classes, often, but overall top 5 coaches, it's always you have to do a lot of things to compute that. You know what I mean? Like because they're all different levels of competition and levels of classes and sizes of schools and all that stuff. So it gets into really a good debate for sure. So that's a tough one to answer. I think same thing like when we're gonna have our discussion on who we think are the top 5 groupings and players and MVPs and offensive defensive players of the year and stuff like that. So we will have our own version of that by the end of the year, but I think that would probably be within that category too. I mean,
no question, Coach Vitti has been impressive what he's done with Mamaroneck. But there are some young guys who can also crack the top 5. That's why it's so hard for me because there's a bunch that I think are battling that I need more time to think about. Variety Ghost did you do Woodlands versus Dobbs? We did. We both picked that game. We both picked Dobbs. This game will be this video will be posted so you can see.
Yep. You can go see and check out the DVR. There will be chapters added as well.
Yep. All right, perfect. All right, guys, we're going to close it out there. Thank you guys again so much. If you haven't, give that thumbs up and subscribe for future content. Again, we guys hope
go spread that word, guys. Go spread the word to all your boys. Make sure they go and drop that thumbs up and subscribe. We're trying to get this, this channel, like I think I said this last week, but started between just me and Frank and started small. I think around 2019 when we first begun, and that was COVID year. Like really, COVID year was really just starting up, and just thinking about where we started, and we had our own little studio with a green screen and a bunch of merch from all the different teams. And now here we are,
which I love the merch.
Yeah,
if you have merch, send it my way.
Send it this way, But we started from a small channel to now, 680 plus people subscribed. That's obviously an accomplishment. So definitely, guys, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe, and go tell your boys to go do so as well. Hitting that 1,000 would be a great accomplishment for a group of guys on Twitter. From what I guess you would go.
Some people,
some random people on Twitter. I guess that's who we are. We were Section 1 coaches, Section 1 players, and we live in the area.
And we want to showcase these kids and these athletes and these programs, and I think it's been fun. But let's close it out here, Mars. We'll see you guys again, and it might not be live next week. We might be doing just a pure playoff video and talking about the last week of the season for C&D. We'll be focusing on the playoff teams. But that one's kind of up in the air. But we do appreciate you guys joining our live. I know it's been a little bit different, but thank you guys.